Everything in life, man, is perception. And that's the thing. It's you perceive something completely different. Like, I didn't even know what I physically look like. You know, like, I know what I think I look like. I don't know, you know, I might look different to you, or, you know, the guys out in the, you know, it's one of those things. It's all like a construct of yourself that you make up. Yeah. You know, and to get another perception can open the door to where you think differently.
If you never stop eating, you don't allow that process to happen. So you're just like creating more and more junk in your body, creating cells that are not very efficient doing what we're doing. So we were meant to fast.
Are you a fan of intermittent fasting daily?
I'm a fan of intermittent fasting for people with poor blood sugar regulation. I don't think intermittent fasting is good for everybody, just like I don't think keto is good for everybody, just like I don't think vegan diets are good for everybody.
But we know Beyond Meats is not good for anyone.
Beyond Meats is not good for anybody.
Okay.
I mean, I'd actually rather eat the plastic carton that comes in than eat the because I just crap that out.
We have a health expert. This man has actually looked at my lab results and given me some feedback. He was highly recommended by my friend Carlos Reyes. And as I've gotten to know him and looked through his book, I've seen a lot of cool things that I actually want to touch on regarding health that I think are going to help a lot of entrepreneurs. So without further ado, I've got none other than Kian Vu. What's up, man?
How's it going? Thanks for the invitation. Your studio here is amazing.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to have you because I've wanted to start branching off into, you know, experts in other industries and everything else. And I think that health is something I'm very into now. Yeah. I hadn't had a blood test in like literally my life. Like I haven't had to go look at it. I'm like, I'm fit and feel good, whatever. But now I'm getting the blood test. You know, I got the Aura ring now. I did a 30-day fast with no coffee or alcohol. And I'm just trying, like, I understand I'm getting older. So I'm like, how do I take care of myself better? And I think you're the man to tell me.
Thanks, man. I think so many entrepreneurs, you know, a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs now, and they're like super successful. They really mastered the game of making money and building their empire. They just left out the focus on their health. And so they come to me typically with a lot of money and typically overweight, probably either insulin resistant or diabetic. They've got a lot of metabolic markers off. Their libido is shot, their energy is shot, and the hustle energy that they had building their empire, they've lost that edge. Yeah.
Why do you think that happens?
It's because when you focus, you know, it's where your focus goes. Where your focus goes is where everything goes, and where your energy goes. And when you're focused on just building without being conscious about, you know, other things in your life, if you take that energy away, either from your health or from your relationships or whatever it may be, those things will slip. And so if you're not putting enough attention and energy into maintaining health and optimal performance, you're going to lose that.
Right. So what is typically happening? Like, are they just not working out? Are they just not eating right? Do they not sleep? Is it a combination? How's this play out?
Some people don't even know. So you're right in that they aren't sleeping well. They're not eating well. They've got a lot of stress going on in their lives, and they just haven't had a lot of time to sit down and pause. And when I initially meet a lot of them, they're like, oh yeah, I'm probably not doing this. The thing is, I think they are so wrapped up and so focused on their work that everything else they're not even conscious of. And I think that's really the problem. And I know we're going to talk about my book, and it's really becoming more conscious in 7 areas of your life: sleep, nutrition, movement, your stress and emotions, your thoughts, your relationships, and then also purpose. Those things actually correspond to biological markers and changes that actually speak to your DNA. If you can audit those 7 areas of your life, you can change how your DNA is actually being expressed.
Wow. Yeah, I want to dive into those. Before we dive into them, I'm actually happy to share my health. Yeah. You know, you looked over it. Right now I got a little bit of a cough because I had my event last week, and so I lost my voice, and I guess a lot of stress too, you know?
Yeah.
But tell me, like, what did you see from my markers?
Well, you see somebody that's actually that pays attention to their health pretty well. I mean, a lot of the markers I look at are metabolic health. So I look at people's blood sugars, their insulin levels, because a lot of people right now, if they are not conscious of their health, that's one of the first things that go. I could see that their blood glucose levels are rising, their insulin levels are going up. Those are people heading towards the diabetes realm. And the stats are crazy. Like 1 in 2 people are actually insulin resistant, and about 1 in 4 people are actually diabetic. So you were great in those markers. I then take a look at people's hormones to see where they're at. For men, beginning at the age of 30, people will tend to lose 1 to 2% of their testosterone, and that's really the hormone that keeps people with lean muscle, keeps people from getting brain fog, keeps people feeling motivated. And what I see in a lot of entrepreneurs, like with stress, with the lack of sleep, and then with poor nutrition, their testosterone dips even faster than the regular person. Yours was right on target for your age, and it's perfect. What we do see, and here's the strange thing, is your vitamin D levels were slightly suboptimal. That was really the only thing to replace in you was your vitamin D levels. We typically want them from the numbers of 60 to 80 or so to be optimal. And the thing is, vitamin D is something that we normally get when we get sunshine. You actually golf a lot, so it's pretty surprising that people that live outside, who actually spend a good amount of time outside, are still deficient in vitamin D. Vitamin D is actually a master hormone that's involved in a lot of metabolic processes. And so if your body's spending a lot of time trying to detoxify things and is worked in other ways, your vitamin D levels will dip. So knowing your vitamin D levels are low and optimizing them will keep you, optimized as well.
Yeah, 100%. So it was good for me to see. You prescribed me a few supplements I could just buy on Amazon. Nothing crazy. I think one was it called?
DHEA.
DHEA.
Yeah, DHEA is actually a precursor hormone to some of the sex hormones that we have. So DHEA is a precursor to testosterone. Okay. So that's something that, if you're slightly deficient in that, taking DHEA will increase your energy and will give your testosterone levels a boost as well.
Yeah. Because I was looking at it from the perspective of, man, I see all my buddies getting like TRT and all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, does every entrepreneur I know are they just roided out? Like, what is going on here? And I've never taken anything, period, in my life, because for one, I was a pro athlete, so there was always the drug testing thing.
Yeah.
I could never do it. And two, I just was like, you know what? Like, I like how I look. Like, I don't really care. And so, but I was curious where my levels were at, because I'm like, well, I guess I should actually get tested now. And there's no, I guess, moral thing now, where before it was like, yeah, I'm never doing that morally, because
right.
it's against the rules and everything else. But now there's nothing to stop me from doing whatever I want. But we actually talked about that TRT issue with all these entrepreneurs, like the pros and cons of it.
Absolutely. I mean, some entrepreneurs are so performance based that they just want to take everything. Right. And it's not necessarily the right thing to do, particularly in people who are younger than 40 and who still want to have children. So if you take exogenous TRT, it's actually going to stop your own testes from producing testosterone. And here's the thing. If your TRT is low because you're living a poor lifestyle, you're not really fixing the underlying problem.
Yeah.
Just by taking TRT, and that's just going to increase. So again, that's going to probably cause your balls to shrink, and then cause your sperm count to be lower. And I know that you talked about wanting more children later on down the road. That that's not something I go to first. I first go to the lifestyle, because the lifestyle, most of those things will kind of correct on their own,
right?
If you do that, and then afterwards, there are some other things that you can supplement with that you don't have to go directly to TRT. And finally, if you do need to go TRT, see somebody who actually does it, for a living, somebody who's been trained, either in anti-aging or gotten some hormonal training. Don't just go to anyone to get that done. And certainly if you're younger and if somebody's just pushing TRT on you, I would probably just, ask yourself, am I fully, of the 7 things that I mentioned, am I really living optimally in those 7 areas of my life? And if not, maybe address those first before going exogenous.
For me, obviously, like even when I was playing, we were always thinking about, man, how can we improve our strength and our speed and everything else? So it's like, yeah, I would love to have my testosterone higher. And so I'm like, okay, like what are some things I can do? And I've been doing some research of, like the sauna, I've read, can increase your testosterone. I've read that like getting one of these, I just bought this thing for my bed called a chili pad to make it super cold, to get better sleep, the DHEA. So I'm like, how can I naturally raise my testosterone with all these different ways?
So one thing that's cool about my book is that if you want your body to physiologically function better in all categories, work on those 7 things in the book. If you sleep better, your testosterone and your growth hormone levels will be more optimized. 2 is the nutrition part. Well, testosterone is actually a steroid hormone. So having good fats in your diet will be helpful for that. So that's like coconut or coconut oil, avocado or avocado oil, nuts and seeds and eggs are great sources of cholesterol. That's the building block for testosterone. And then also not eating processed foods and sugars and fried foods and things like that. That'll be helpful too. Next is movement or exercise. If you lift heavy things, you're going to boost your testosterone and your growth hormone. So you could do that naturally.
That's my favorite thing to do.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Stress levels. Are you maintaining, are you like super stressed out? Because if you're stressed out, guess what? Your testosterone levels will plummet as well.
Right.
So all those 7 things that I talked about in my book is actually ways to actually maintain testosterone naturally.
Let's talk about the 7 things. Let's go over number 1.
Yeah. Sleep.
Sleep. Okay. So tell me, what is there to know about sleep?
Well, sleep is really right. I put it as number 1 because if your sleep is off, it throws your whole body off. Your body is under a normal rhythm called the circadian rhythm. And basically all your hormones will basically, go in line to the wake and sleep cycles of you. If your sleep is off, your hormones are going to be off and your biology is going to be off. So maintaining and getting regular sleep is so important. That's a tough thing to do as an entrepreneur. But what I say is if you can craft your lifestyle, and it's so hard for an entrepreneur, where you go to bed and you wake up the same day or at the same time every single day, even on the weekends, that's when you have optimal sleep. And typically you want to shoot for 7 to 9 hours.
Right. So for me, it's an interesting thing because my wife hates it because, well, she doesn't hate it. She's just jealous that I can fall asleep on a dime, like instantly. And she has a tough time sleeping. She wakes up a lot. She's not getting good sleep. And for me, when I was playing baseball, I had to learn to sleep in like weird situations, right? Because we'd be on the road, we'd finish a game at midnight. I'd have to sleep on the bus on the way to the next place, in a crappy seat. I remember one time in one of my teams that we didn't have a sleeper bus where, they had like little beds on the bus. So we would buy these Walmart floaty rafts and we'd blow them up and sleep on the floor on a raft, a pool raft. And so I've literally slept in anything you can imagine. And I taught myself how to sleep quick. But I never understood, like, I guess, how different I was with sleep until recently when I got the Aura Ring. So, like, the Aura Ring is, like, super legit with telling you your sleep.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I only sleep about, on average, if you look at my stats, I'd say it's about 5.5 to 6 hours. But my deep sleep is usually, like, 2 to 3 hours a night.
That's great.
Yeah. And as I started researching more, it was like, well, yeah, that's why I don't have to sleep as long because my deep sleep is like, would you say it's the most vital?
It's the most rejuvenative part. Your deep sleep and your REM sleep are most important. Your deep sleep is really important for cellular rejuvenation, and that's when you get all your rest. Your REM sleep, that's when your memories consolidate. Like if you wake up one day and all of a sudden things just clicked, that's because you were in REM sleep. That's where all the lucid dreaming happens in REM. So you want to make sure you have a good amount of both. The deep sleep usually happens earlier in the evening, so you usually get more deep sleep earlier on, and you get more REM sleep a little bit later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because my REM sleep is low because I just don't sleep a lot.
Yeah.
Like what would be the purpose of getting more REM sleep? Just for ideas or?
Well, yes, again, it consolidates memory, and it's also super important for your emotional and mental states. So people who don't get enough REM are typically depressed. They're very anxious and things like that as well.
Okay. What would you say a guy like me who's just used to sleeping less and like my body just, to your point, I go to sleep around the same time every night. I wake up around the same time every day with or without an alarm. Like, would you say I should still sleep more or I'm used to it?
No, I would probably say if you're getting 6 hours and you're feeling great throughout the day and you're getting adequate amounts of deep sleep, I think you're gravy. You're perfect. So normally if you live a relatively good lifestyle, like all the other 6 factors in your life are going really, really well, you tend to actually need a little bit less sleep than somebody who doesn't.
Oh, that makes sense because my body's already getting taken care of with the other stuff.
There you go.
Okay. So sleep's super important. Would you say that that's the most important? Like if you had to pick.
Oh, well, I mean, look, if sleep is off, everything else is off. I can't say there's one that's more important than the others, except for I feel like life is different when I am not living most authentically as the person I'm meant to show up as. If I am an inauthentic person and I'm not showing up the way that I should be showing up and living life that way, and this is really in that space of purpose, I feel like I'm sick. And so purpose, I think for me is really the number one thing.
Okay, so let's talk about purpose as the second one.
Yeah,
So tell me about that.
Well, purpose is really, are you living a life that's truly aligned to you? You know, and some people are like, oh, how do I find my purpose and whatnot? And I think it's less about something you need to find, but something you remember. You know, I have a 17-month-old daughter, and she is just like really, really present and happy. And she's just like glowing. And I believe that's really, truly our natural state. We go through life and then we're told maybe, okay, you're never going to get a job doing that. You'll never make money doing that. Oh, you're too this, you're too that. And we start to conform or change who we are. And that actually builds stress in our body when we try to become someone we're not, you know? When I was a doctor who was hustling in the hospital, trying to succeed, that's how I got sick. I was so living this life that I thought would bring me happiness and quote unquote success, that living a life outside of my, outside of alignment to who I really am actually brought disease to me. And so so how do you find your purpose? It's remembering who you are, remembering the things that light you up, remembering the things that put you in flow and doing those things. And if you start to share that with other people, share who you are with other people, that's purpose.
I've talked about this with jobs and careers and everything else. You know, when you're doing what you love and you're really good at it, you know, it really doesn't matter how much money you make, right? You're going to just love it. And if you can make a lot of money doing it, then you're just really living good. But so many people they do a job they hate, you know, and maybe it makes some money, maybe it doesn't. Or, you know, they're doing something that maybe they're not that good at. And, you know, maybe they're good at something else that they're really passionate about, but, you know, it just doesn't pay the bills for whatever reason. And so for me, you know, I've realized as I've started to learn my purpose more and more and learn what I was good at and understand myself, it just like everything became easier.
Right. Yeah. There's an energetic, I mean, when you're doing the thing that lights you up that you should be doing, it's almost kind of like you've tapped into flow and things just become a lot easier. And get this, once you're in that mode and you're like this high vibe person, whether you're in business, you're in your relationship, whatever it is, more is going to come to you.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. What's the next one?
The next one would be nutrition.
Let's talk about this. There's so much that goes into diet that I have so many questions about.
Okay.
But you tell me first. Like
I try to make things really simple. Eat real food. Eat mostly plants, like 75% of your plate should be plants. And then the rest is a clean protein source. And just eat it minimally processed, meaning, you know, going from farm to table, there's less like, you know, processing along the way. So if you eat real food and you don't eat all the time, you know, occasionally skip a meal, occasionally, you know, fast for a couple of days, that's typically it. Avoid sugar and all that processed foods. Those are basically the basics.
So tell me about fasting. Since I recently I went on a 2-day fast, and then that led to a 30-day fast of I still ate food, but just coffee, alcohol, stimulants, everything. So like what kind of benefits does fasting give?
So some people think fasting is a thing that we're just doing now, when really fasting is what we were designed to do as a species that's alive, right? You've got every single species, whether it's one cell or multi-cell, that needs to be able to develop a way to survive when there's energy resources and when they're not. So that's built in.
Right.
So how people are, or how we are created is that when we don't have the energy sources, we learn how to take junk from our body, renew them, and then perform. That's what happens when we fast. There's a process called autophagy, which is basically eating up the stuff that's junk and then renewing it for something else. If you never stop eating, you don't allow that process to happen. So you're just like creating more and more junk in your body, creating cells that are not very efficient doing what we're doing. So we were meant to fast. And so, you know, a lot of people find that they are much clearer when they fast. They find that they've got more energy when they fast. And we definitely are seeing a lot of data that people are living longer when they include fasting in their life.
So how often would you fast and how long? Like what do you think's optimal for
I
just a
think
normal person?
I would probably say, you know, if you're used to eating all the time, start by, you know, shaving down the hours you eat to like 12 hours and then 10 hours. Do it a couple times a week if that feels good, and then just mix it up.
So you're just talking about intermittent fasting.
Well, intermittent fasting and some prolonged fasting. So prolonged fasting is, you know, typically more than 48 hours. And when you do prolonged fasts, you get additional benefits. You get more autophagy. You get stem cell renewal. But what I would say is our ancestors would basically ate when there was food around, and when there wasn't food around, they would stop eating. So I would say just mix it up. If you're not hungry, maybe just go without eating at that time.
Yeah. Would you say though, like maybe once a month, once a quarter, once a week? Like what?
Well, this is how I do it. And I think, you know, do this with your doctor, see what your labs look like, and see are the results you want in your life, you know.
Talk to
yeah.
from my point of view,
Yeah.
since you know my labs. Like what would you prescribe me if I was like, you know what, doc, I want to start fasting more regularly?
For what? I would ask.
I don't know, because you told me it was good.
Yeah. Well, I would probably say you don't need to lose weight right now. All right.
Yeah.
Already you're performing at a great level. So I would probably say for you, maybe every quarter doing a two-day fast is great.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Totally cool. Do you think that like the people who intermittent fast, you know, every day, do you think that that's a thing that should be done?
Yeah, I think people will, in general, eat way too much. Like once they wake up, they are eating during the day between meals, they're snacking, and that, again, doesn't allow your body to rejuvenate. So I think people are eating too much. I think intermittent fasting, really kind of shrinking down the time window that you're eating, that's going to help a lot for many people.
So one thing that I've always struggled with intermittent fasting is just like I work out in the morning. So it's like I'd be cool not eating, but the problem is like you should always eat protein right after you work out, right? So like what do I do?
That's a great question. Some people say that you need that protein around to really, if your goal isn't to build up a lot of muscle, you're probably okay.
Just not eating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I want to bulk up, I got to eat the protein after.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's my biggest struggle. It's like I get done lifting at like 8 a.m.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I eat my breakfast and whatever. And then I have dinner at 6. And so, you know, it's pretty, I know a lot of these intermittent fasting people want you to eat like in an 8-hour window.
Yeah. So typically those are the rules. I mean, it's like I said, if you're not used to doing that, start with 12, then go down to 10, then go down to 8.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What about just like diet in general, like carbs, no carbs? Like,
Well, I was a diabetic. There's really no essential carbs in our body, so we don't really need it. So because I was a diabetic, I tried to avoid it as much as possible. But look, if it's something we're celebrating and the dessert looks good, I'm going to have a bite.
right.
Yeah.
So you just don't eat carbs really, period.
I would have it on occasion. I just try to avoid it when it's not, whenever possible or whenever it's not super tasty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I've noticed is like for me anyways, and I'd be curious to hear your take, is like, you know, I've worked out with so many athletes and bodybuilders and things. And so they live by carbs, right? They're like, you got to eat chicken and rice, you know? And I'm like, dude, and they eat like whatever, 8 times a day,
Yeah.
you know, every other hour to bulk up. And I'm like, dude, I get so fat when I eat so many carbs. Like my body just cannot handle it. And I'm used to just eating a very low carb, higher fat diet. Like I love beef. I love, you know, dressings and sauces and everything else. And I'm cool not eating carbs.
Yeah, it really depends on your activity level and what you're doing. If you're an athlete, you're going to be able to burn that off great. I know I'm not one. So if I ate carbs, I will, again, probably get diabetic again and also get fat.
Okay, so I shouldn't feel bad about,
No.
you know, my body breaking down.
No.
Okay. So what's the next one?
So we got movement. Just move every day. I mean, sitting is seriously the new smoking. I mean, it really revs down your body's will to want to live. So just move. Lift weights. I think that's great. Get in something every day. Just like don't stay still.
Yeah.
The key point.
What's funny is, since I grew up an athlete, I always was active. I'd play basketball, I'd lift weights, I'd do those things. And I remember thinking when I retired, this was back in 2017, I was like, man, I wonder if I'm going to have the same drive to like be active. Like, I wonder if I'm going to get fat or whatever. And sure enough, like all those years of just habits and discipline, I just never stopped. I'm like still training the exact same way. Now, granted, I don't sprint and run the way I used to. I just lift weights. But now, I play golf and I move around, and I just couldn't imagine life not being active.
Yeah. How many entrepreneurs that sit where I'm at right now would you say live an active lifestyle?
Man, I would guess, not to throw people under the bus, but just thinking like off the top of my head, definitely less than half. Maybe it's a third actually do it.
Yeah. And so I really hope, that this message, will wake some people up to really incorporate that into their life. Build your empire, yes, but you got to remember that you need to be who you are. Like you need to be in the thrive state. You need to, have your energy, your vitality to carry out everything you want in your life.
What do you think about like, I guess, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs like work out and that's what I do. But I've realized like in my post-playing career, like I love competing. Do you think that there's something healthy about getting out and competing?
Absolutely. If it gets you to move and do stuff. I mean, ask yourself, does it bring you stress to do that?
Yeah, it's true too. People just get
Right.
stressed out over competing.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'm like, now that I'm playing golf again, I'm like, okay, this is a sport that I can play forever. And, I can compete against other people and it's going to be great.
Yeah. I think if that allows you to get better at your craft and it allows you to gauge sort of like your evolution and improvement, I think that's great. If you're tied to an outcome, I need to be champion, this and that, then it could be a little, pathologic.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So I think that's 4 of them.
Yeah.
What are the rest?
Well, we got your emotions.
Okay.
So emotions like joy, like connection, like laughter, all those positive emotions actually will decrease inflammation in your body. It will increase your immune system and it'll make you live longer if you got those emotions in your life. Emotions like stress, like anger, like resentment, like hate, like worry, like anxiety, all those emotions drive up the stress hormones. It will increase inflammation. It will decrease your immune system. That will put your cells in a suboptimal state. And ultimately that leads you to have chronic symptoms and then eventually down the road, chronic disease. So just be mindful of those emotions, be mindful of your stress. And then if you're living in those lower vibrational emotions, ask yourself why and get some help if you're in that situation.
So let's talk about this. Like, how would you test that somebody's just like emotionally not there? Like just looking at them, or like, could you see it in their blood?
You could start, well, not directly. I can't look at your blood and go, oh, okay, you must be depressed, right? It could suggest some stuff. I mean, because there are some biological things that make you feel a certain way. But in general, I could see if somebody was depressed or really stressed out, their inflammatory markers on their bloods will be increased, and probably some other markers would change as well.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, for somebody who is going through, emotional issues, right? They're a negative person versus, a positive person. Like, is there anything that you would suggest someone does besides, get on an antidepressant or something?
Absolutely.
What would you suggest?
Well, here's the cool part about my book is that all those 7 things are interconnected.
Right.
They're all energetically connected. So if you work on one thing, you're going to improve something else. So emotionally, if you're off, if you sleep better, your emotions are going to get better. If you eat better, your emotions are going to get better. If you start working out, your emotions will start getting better.
You live in your purpose.
There you go.
Definitely going to be.
Your thoughts, we can talk about thoughts later on in a second, but if you start to reorient your thoughts and take your focus out of like, oh my God, this stressed out thing, and start to focus on something else. Because you can't change all the thoughts that go through your head, and a lot of them are negative, but you can't change where you put the flashlight.
Right. That makes sense. So let's talk about that. Thoughts. Like, what's happening there?
Well, basically, where you put your attention will get you to start to feel a certain way, right? So We have 70 to 80,000 thoughts that go through our mind every day. About 80% of them are going to be negative,
Wow.
right? So if you start to focus and think those negative thoughts are real, guess what? You're going to start to feel those negative emotions. That's going to raise up the stress hormones, increase inflammation, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Can you notice that they are just thoughts and that you have the control of focusing on what thought you like? You have the control of writing your own story. This happened. You can make it mean, a pity story, and turn yourself into a victim, or you could take that same situation and say, oh no, that was an opportunity of growth for me. I grew from that experience. And just reframing those things in your mind, making things mean something different, changing your story will change your biology. Because shifting your thoughts, shifting your perspective, the story, and all those things will ultimately shift your emotions. And we talked to you about emotions and how that makes you feel.
Yeah, it's interesting with thoughts because, man, like the more that I guess I've grown in success and other things, I've realized like it always had started from my thoughts, right? Every business idea was a thought. Every adjustment you made is a thought. Every, reason why I've done what I've done is because I first thought about it before doing it. None of it just happened by luck. It's not like just this crap just came out of thin air. So I've now been very, very protective of my mind. Yeah. I'm like, all right, who are the people that are talking to me, right? Like, are there negative people around me? I don't want to be near them, What am I watching? If I'm watching just Netflix and whatever, and it's not, if I'm watching the news and everyone's just talking about the market crashing,
right?
Like, what am I going to think? If I'm just watching social media mindlessly and not getting anything. So it's like now I spend the majority of my time just doing things that I know are going to like benefit me, So it's like, okay, I'm going to read books. Like I'm going to go hang out with my family. Like I'm going to spend my time doing things that basically make my thoughts more powerful.
Yeah. You got to mine the garden of your brain. Because if not, you can let the weeds of negativity grow, and that's going to actually affect your biology.
Right.
So you're doing all the right things, like improving your mindset by listening to things that actually, give you new ideas. And then you mentioned something that's super important, which is the next thing, really, which is community. The people that you hang out with, you adopt their energy, their belief, their behaviors. So if you want to be healthy, hang out with healthy people. If you want to be wealthy, hang out with wealthy people, because you'll adopt those things. Because we are basically, the results that we have in our life are basically all of the conscious choices that we make. And so we want to make better choices, hang out with people that are making those choices as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. Before you came, we just interviewed Houston Crosta, and he was literally saying that. He goes, dude, you need to start hanging out with me longer, because then you're going to end up buying a $3 million car and this and that. I'm like, I don't want to hang out with you because I know that will happen. I don't want to buy that. And he's like, nah, dude, you got to hang out with me. You got to hang out with me because, you're going to start leveling up. And I'm like, yeah, there's actually a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of truth to that. Like Houston, I wanted to reach out because I don't want him to be an entrepreneur who's chasing all that stuff, because I could tell that he's insulin resistant just by looking at him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He definitely, and we talk about it on the show, like he knows he needs to work on his health, and, he's a very typical entrepreneur that I see all the time. Like they're so driven on everything they do. And, it's easy to take other things to a back seat because we only have so much time, right? So it's like, man, the hour that I was going to spend at the gym, if I put that towards business, the ROI is going to be so much higher. And then, what's the ROI on my health? It doesn't make me any money.
Yeah. You don't see that initially until you get to the point where you can't perform like you can. Like there's this quote from the Dalai Lama who was asked, what he found most interesting about humanity. He said, man, because he would sacrifice his health in order to make money, and then sacrifice his money to recuperate his health.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the story of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I've realized that like very early, that my health and relationships and all that is so much more important to me than like how much money I make. And so I actively make the conscious decision of like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, why wouldn't you do this? I'm like, because it's going to, like, nothing is free, like there's a cost to everything you do. And so the cost is, well, where am I going to get that time from? Where is it coming from? Is it going to come from my family or my faith or my health, or is it going to come from a different business? And like, what's going to happen?
Absolutely. I went from a place where I had a multi-million-dollar house in LA, nice dream car. I was so tired, so fatigued out, and so unhappy when I did that. And I sold everything, did a lot of personal development, started to pivot my career. Living in my parents' house with security bars lined across the house with a really crappy yard and 2 liquor stores at the end of my block. And I remember a day that I looked up because, my fiance and her daughter moved in with me, and her daughter was just so stoked because they never even had their own bedroom and their own yard. And she was just glowing. And I was just like, wow, she's so happy. And to see her happy just made me happy. And I'm like, at that point, I was like, wow, I have a lot less materially than I ever had before, but I am happier and definitely healthier in mind and body and spirit.
Right.
And then once I got there, once you start to align yourself with what you're doing, the abundance will come elsewhere, because now I'm getting paid a lot to do keynotes and TV shows and things like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So what's the last one? You said community?
Yeah, community. It's, the people around you are basically can bring you up or down, can bring down your emotions like energy vampires. So maintaining healthy, fruitful relationships is so important, because we are social beings. We are meant to be in community with each other. And so when you isolate, that's the other thing. If you isolate, loneliness in the elderly actually brings about more disease, and people die earlier if they're lonely. So making sure you nurture them, and creating those relationships are very important for your health as well.
I've got the man behind 10X Health, Grant Cardone's newest venture, where I've heard a ton of great things about it. I got the chance to meet this man a few months back when I was in Miami, and a bunch of my friends have been doing 10X Health, and it's been going pretty good. So I decided to get a test myself. And so right here, I actually have my test results of a genetic test to see basically how I can improve. And I've yet to go through them. And, so we're going to go through them live on the show, and you're going to see exactly what I'm going through. But before we go through these tests, I actually want to introduce the man and have him talk about what exactly 10X Health is doing and how the business has grown and how it can really help a lot of entrepreneurs and people in general. So I've got none other than Gary Brecka. What's up, man?
How you doing? It's
Good.
great to be here.
Yeah. So I saw you first, like with Dana White, like this. How long ago did this start?
So it's been about 6 months now, 7 months.
Yeah.
Since we started working with Dana.
Yeah. I saw him like talking about this revolutionary thing. And then later I found out, I'm like, oh, that's Grant's thing with Gary. And like, okay, now it's all starting to make sense.
Right.
How did he even find you?
So he was referred to me by a friend of his named Carrie Kasem. If you remember Casey Kasem's Weekly Top 40, it's kind of my generation, but her father. So Carrie Kasem, his daughter, is a good friend of Dana's and a friend of mine. And she referred me to Dana as a gift to Dana because he had done a lot for her in her life. And she said, hey, my gift back to you is I'm going to introduce you to Gary Brecka. And he's going to change your life.
That's amazing. So, we'll get into what 10X Health actually is, but what were you doing before this?
So before that, I had a wellness company that was treating Grant Cardone amongst other people. And it was based out of Naples, Florida. And we got Grant Cardone as a patient. And 3 years into treating Grant, he said, listen, we've got to put this together and put it on the 10X platform and use my ability to scale this and really bring it to the masses. So he acquired us in September of last year, September 2021. And it's been kind of a meteoric parabolic rise ever since then, because they're real experts at scaling a business. I'm kind of expert at science and knew really not a lot about scaling a business. And then we built a platform to roll franchises out all across the country. Our intention is to have 1,000 franchises, 20 in every state in America. We built 5 mega centers around the country right now in Vegas, Beverly Hills, Miami, Arizona. And we use those as platforms to train clinicians and physicians. Because remember, I'm not licensed to practice medicine. So we have licensed physicians, MDs, that are licensed to practice medicine that actually can read and interpret blood work and prescribe therapies for patients.
So what's your background then?
So my background is really in research. My undergraduate degrees were in biology. My postgraduate degrees are in human biology with a neuroscience concentration. And for 20 years after graduating from grad school, I worked as a mortality expert in the insurance industry. So,
So what would you do? Like guess when people are going to die? Like
It's
what
really-
does that mean?
it's kind of gruesome, but kind of morbid. But you wouldn't believe the number of financial services instruments that are actually based on when you're going to die. I mean, life insurance is the obvious one, but annuities, reverse mortgages, all kinds of financial services instruments are designed around how many more months you have left on earth. I mean, you can write a check to an insurance company called a SPIA, single premium immediate annuity, and they will guarantee you an income stream for the rest of your life. And what they're really guaranteeing you is an income stream until you're no longer on this earth. And to calculate that payment, they use your mortality, what's called your specific mortality. A life insurance company, same thing. If they're going to put, $5 million or $10 million or $25 million worth of risk on your life, they really don't care where you are on an actuarial curve. They want to know specifically how many more months does this person have left on earth, because we're only betting on one variable. There's only a single variable that matters once they issue a life insurance policy. And insurance companies have data that no other medical enterprise has, no clinical study, not even the US federal government. And that is that they know the day, the date, the time, the location, and the cause of death for anyone that they've insured, right? Because as a requirement to get a death claim, you need to file a death certificate, and it gives you exactly what did you die of, where did you die, how did you die, what day, what's the date, what was the time. And they take that information and essentially backtrack into your medical record and look at the genesis of what led to that. So if we got 5 to 10 years of medical records on you and 5 years of demographic data, then we could tell the insurance company how long you had to live to the month. So
That's crazy.
and it's astounding. I believe if this database could just see the light of day, it would permanently change the face of humanity.
Just because people would be freaked out and
Well, not just that people would be freaked out, they would realize how ineffective a lot of very common treatments are, and how relatively simple it is to stay out of the system. We're very good at crisis medicine. I'm not anti-big pharma. I'm not anti-modern medicine in any way. If I hit a windshield at 20 miles an hour, I want a surgeon, I want painkillers, I'm going to the ER. I believe in modern medicine. I'm a huge fan of modern medicine. I believe that big pharma has done a lot of good, but I also believe that modern medicine has a paucity of understanding of basic human physiology. And in this absence of understanding, we've created a sick care system, and the system's very good at crisis medicine, but it's very poor at creating optimal health in the population. I mean, if you look at Johns Hopkins study or the Harvard study done in 2016, medical error is the third leading cause of death in America, according to these clinical.
What's 1 and 2
studies? Cardiovascular disease and cancer.
Okay.
But if you think that modern medicine is actually killing more people than morbid obesity and diabetes combined, you get an idea of how ineffective we are at keeping people out of the system, right? And it's medical error. And it's not that physicians woefully are mistreating patients or that the healthcare system is designed against humanity. It's that there's a lack of understanding of human physiology. We don't look at human beings the same way, for example, that we look at plants and trees. I remember in grad school, I had to take all these plant botany courses, and I hated them, but I had to take them. But I'll never forget that when anything went wrong in the leaf of a tree or the branch or the trunk of a tree or shrub or a bush, the very first thing they would do is they would core test the soil. And they would say, what's missing from the soil that could be causing this disease in this tree, could be causing, this leaf to rot. And they'd say, oh, there's nitrogen missing in the soil. They'd add nitrogen to the soil and the leaf would be healed. We don't think about human beings that way, right? We don't go into the human body and say, what raw material is missing from this person's body that could be causing this condition to happen? I'll give you a perfect example that I saw hundreds of times. If you go into, if I could go magically into your body right now and just deplete vitamin D3, cholecalciferol, the sunshine vitamin.
Okay. I wouldn't be tan.
You wouldn't be tan. Number one, you'd lose your tan.
Yeah.
But number two, this is arguably the single most important compound in the human body, right? I mean, human beings have hundreds of vitamins in our bloodstream, but we're only capable of making one, vitamin D3. There's scantly a single cell in the entire human body that doesn't have a receptor for this vitamin. When it's depleted, it has an effect on our immune function, our hormone function, on all kinds of things. So if I was able to go into the body and deplete vitamin D3, and about 50% of the world's population is clinically deficient, darker complected populations are even in the 85% or more range, because the darker your skin, the less vitamin D3 you generate from the sun. If I was able to deplete this, eventually you would present with rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms, right? Your joints would start to ache. The soles of your feet would be sore and achy when you got out of bed in the morning. You'd wake up feeling like you had a workout the night before when you haven't. You'd notice that you're starting to be brain foggy. You'd probably start to notice that the incidence of getting sick is more frequent. And if you went to the wrong family practitioner, which I saw hundreds of times in my career, because you present with rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms, they just diagnose you with rheumatoid arthritis without doing SED rates, blood work. And generally they will put you on something called a corticosteroid. And so now you have a missing raw material in the human body, D3, cholecalciferol, that's led you to seek medical advice. You're misdiagnosed with a condition you didn't have. You don't have rheumatoid. You started a corticosteroid, which was a prescription you didn't need. And we knew from the database that once you started a corticosteroid, you had roughly 6 years and 1 day until you were having a joint replacement. So now 6 years in the future, you're having a joint replacement. And now that joint replacement causes a reduction in mobility, what's called your ambulatory profile, how well you ambulate. So now you've been diagnosed with a condition you don't have, put on a prescription that wasn't needed. It ended up having a joint replacement that wasn't required, reduced your mobility, and now you can bring in all of the diseases that exacerbate with reduced mobility. Sitting is the new smoking, right? Sedentary lifestyle is the leading cause of all-cause mortality. So now you're 6 years older, 7, 8, 9 years older, and you're having conditions from reduced mobility that you wouldn't have had possibly ever in your life.
Because we're just so much on the internet and our phones, and work is sitting a lot now.
No doubt. I mean, aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. We have to stop telling grandma not to go outside, it's too cold, not to go outside, it's too hot, just to lay down, just to relax, right? Just to eat at the first pang of hunger. Because this is collapsing all of our natural defense mechanisms, right? The more aggressively we seek comfort, the weaker we become.
Right.
Right.
So to me, it sounds like our system today is very reactionary. Oh, you've got an issue. Let's treat it. Let's fix it. Let's, put a Band-Aid on it. And you're on the other side, like, what can we do to prevent these things from happening? Because we know they're going to happen.
Right. I believe that there's a term in medicine called idiopathic, right? In Latin, it means of unknown origin. It's basically a way of saying we have no idea. All right. So you have idiopathic hypertension, idiopathic anxiety, idiopathic hypothyroid. You have idiopathic lots of things. And I don't believe that anything in human beings is idiopathic. I don't believe it's of an unknown origin. I just believe we don't know the origin because we haven't asked enough questions. And human beings, we function very much the same way. So when you start depleting things in the human body, you deplete hormones, you deplete certain vitamins, you deplete nutrients, you deplete amino acids, then you have very specific consequences from that. And so the first question in my mind that we should be asking, and when presented with any condition that someone is facing, is what raw material is missing from this body that could cause this to happen?
Yeah.
Right. What could cause a rise in the inflammatory amino acid homocysteine, which could then cause the vascular system to clamp down, which could then cause a rise in blood pressure and lead to something called hypertension. And instead of saying, well, you have hypertension, we can't find the source, so we're going to medicate you, say, we have hypertension, we need to search for what things could be missing from this person's body that could cause this condition. And I just picked on hypertension as one, but there's a whole myriad of issues. My sincere belief is that most of us are walking around at about 55, maybe 60% of our true state of normal. We have accepted such an erosion of our baseline sense of normalcy that we have forgotten as a society what it's truly like to feel normal. I mean, most being tired and
brain fog. You're like, yeah, I
we
mean, it
just
just is what
accept
it
brain
is.
fog, and I just don't sleep that well, and and I've got a little bit of weight gain or water retention. I've lost my libido. I have a really poor response to exercise now. I used to have a great response to exercise. My moods have just been numb for the last few years, right? The peaks and valleys of mood are gone.
I think though a lot of people can just say, well, I'm getting older.
That's a classic misnomer, right?
Yeah.
None of these are consequences of aging, right? I mean, aging essentially isn't.
So is it
decrease
in
in
my
weight.
mind that like it's harder for me to maintain my physique as I get older, or what do you believe?
What I believe is, yes, it's harder for you to maintain your physique because, as we get older, a process in the body called methylation starts to become less and less and less efficient. So, aging at the end of the day is truly a mitochondrial disease, right? The mitochondria inside the cell, which is the powerhouse of the cell, becomes increasingly less functional, less powerful, and you're essentially powering down the human body. And there are lots of ways that we can restore healthy mitochondria, not the least of which is free, which is exercising and mobility. I can't emphasize enough how we just don't move enough as a society anymore. But the second is to understand that there's not a single compound known to mankind, not one, that enters the human body and is used in the format that we put it in. So there's no vitamin, mineral, nutrient, amino acid, protein, carbohydrate, nothing that we put into the body that's used in that form. Everything that enters our body goes through this process of being refined into the usable form. This refining process is called methylation. And when methylation breaks, it's not just broken in one cell, it is broken in every cell in the body because methylation is governed by the DNA. And so what happens is when we deplete certain raw materials, simple things like B vitamins, vitamin B12, methylated folates, amino acids, then what happens is any process that requires that ingredient in the human body is now deficient. It's literally like going to a bakery chef and saying, listen, you can bake whatever you want, but you just can't use butter. Well, it doesn't sound like a big deal, right? It's one ingredient, but just imagine the number of recipes it would affect. So if you go into the human body and you just affect the methylation of tryptophan into serotonin, that simple conversion process, well, now you have a deficiency in serotonin, which is one of the definitions of depression. Right. Serotonin is the main driver of mood. It's a structural component of all of our elevated emotional states. So as we get older, if this methylation process gets less refined and our serotonin drops, we become less passionate, less elated, less joyful, less aroused. Our libido is off.
Right.
You start to deplete dopamine, you drive behavior. You deplete dopamine, enough, you will drive addictive behavior. Right. The absence of dopamine is the presence of addiction. And so going into a human body and just testing it, looking at blood work and genetic testing, and the reason why I'm a huge fan of gene testing is that there are some major genes of methylation, and these genes, when they are not operating properly, can be supplemented for their deficiency. And like I say, when DNA is not functioning properly, it's broken in every cell in the body. And this is the genesis of a lot of the most common ailments that we face. I mean, if you think about cancer, all cancer is DNA replication run amok. It's aberrant DNA replication.
Yeah.
So, and you think about the DNA, that's the CEO of the cell, right? We know that DNA makes the cell divide, but it also gives the cell all of its instructions on what to do all day, every day. It's called transcription. So when that process breaks down, we get slowly sick over time, and we accept these as a consequence of aging.
And we don't have to do that.
No. I mean, I'm not a big believer in supplementing for the sake of supplementing, but I'm a huge believer in supplementing for deficiency.
Right. So when somebody goes to you at now 10X Health, let's walk through like what happens. So the first thing is you do a gene test, right? And that's basically what I have here.
Yes.
So I think the easiest thing to do is walk me through for me
Okay.
on what I need to be doing. So I'll give you my gene test.
Okay. This is your gene test. So we're going to put this
Yep,
up on the screen.
we'll B-roll this for everyone who's watching on YouTube,
Okay, great.
so you'll be able to see it. If you're listening, we'll do our best to verbalize it.
Yeah. So, so if you look at these genes, remember, we actually develop our personality around our genes.
Okay.
So you can tell a lot about a person by what genetic breaks they have and what genetic breaks they don't have. Because in general, certain gene breaks lead to certain deficiencies. Certain deficiencies lead to very specific outcomes. So the first thing that you should know about this page is that all 5 of these colored rectangles should be green.
Okay.
Right? So when they're yellow, it means that one parent gave you the gene mutation. If they were red, which they're not, it would mean that both parents gave you the gene mutation.
And what is a mutation that sounds like a bad thing?
Yeah, it sounds like a bad thing, but they're very, very, very common. I mean, they're not catastrophic. I mean, it's estimated that 44% of the world's population has
gene mutation.
MTHFR. And, you know, this and this other gene COMT, about 26% of the population has that. So what these genes do is they code for the conversion of certain raw materials. I always use the example that we pull crude oil out of the ground, but you can't put crude oil into your gas tank, right? Because the car doesn't understand that fuel source. Human beings are no different. We put raw materials into the body. If the body can't convert it to the usable form, we now have a deficiency. That deficiency leads to certain conditions. So when we look at the 3 genetic breaks that you have, let's start down here with MTHFR. MTHFR it's commonly referred to as one of the worst to have, but the easiest to fix because it's very early in the methylation cycle.
And by the way, so just so we're clear, I did nothing lifestyle-wise. I was born with this. Is that what
You
you're
were
saying?
born with this. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. The genes you're born with are the genes you'll die with. So this is why you only do this test once in your life.
Okay.
And by the way, we're not the only one that do this gene test. There's lots of companies that do these gene tests. But if you pull your entire genetic profile, you're going to get a lot of noise, like things that are not actionable. I mean, if I pulled your whole genetic profile, I could say, okay, you have olive skin, you have brown eyes, you have detached earlobes, but there's nothing you can do with that information.
It's just,
right.
It is who I am.
It's just information, right?
Yeah.
And it's fine to know your heritage, your background, but we want to look at genes that are actionable, meaning while I can't fix the gene, I can supplement for its function. If you just Google MTHFR, make sure you capitalize it, by the way.
Okay.
You'll find yourself on some really colorful websites. Yeah. So if you Google MTHFR and put the word and then put anxiety, gut health, brain fog, chronic fatigue, and I mean, conditions that you're facing, and look at the hordes of published clinical research, peer-reviewed, human-studied, published clinical research, linking a lot of these common ailments in society to a genetic mutation where you have a deficiency in raw material. So what this gene does, it converts folic acid and its other precursors into the form the body uses, called methylfolate. And so, again, while that might not sound like a big deal, this raw material goes into all kinds of transactions in the body, neurotransmitter formation. So people with MTHFR can have all kinds of symptoms, anxiousness, anxiety, mild anxiety. The type of anxiety they have will have 3 characteristics. Primarily, they will have had anxiety on and off throughout their lifetime. Secondly, it's very hard for them to point to the specific trigger that causes it. Right. So this is kind of proving that it's not coming from a cluster of symptoms outside their body. And then third, if they've tried anti-anxiety medications, they won't really work. It'll make them feel like a zombie. So MTHFR is a precursor for all of these other transactions in the body. When it's broken, the body's deficient of its early raw material that it uses in all these transactions. And very often people that have MTHFR will either have mild gut issues or also have some acid reflux. Because it affects the motility of the gut. They are particularly sensitive to something called folic acid, which might not sound like a big deal until you realize that folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet.
Okay.
Folic acid, I think it was 1993, the US federal government agreed to spray our entire grain supply with folic acid. All white flour, white rice, white bread, white pasta, grains of all kinds are fortified or enriched, which means they're sprayed with the chemical folic acid. And I say chemical because folic acid doesn't occur anywhere naturally in nature. You cannot find folic acid anywhere on the surface of the earth.
Why do they do it?
Well, it was initially because they thought it would prevent a neural tube defect in pregnant women. But the truth is folic acid doesn't prevent anything. It doesn't. The body has to convert it into methylfolate to prevent a neural tube defect. In fact, pregnant women that take high doses of folic acid and have this gene mutation have very high incidences of postpartum depression. Because what happens to a female that cannot process folic acid when you put 1,400% of the daily allowance of folic acid into her body? She goes nuts and she develops this depressive state. And then eventually the pregnancy ends. They stop taking the prenatal vitamin. The symptoms go away. So they blame it on the pregnancy, not on the vitamin. And this is where I mean we have a fundamental, I think, paucity of understanding about how human beings work. I mean, why would we ever think that something that we make chemically in a laboratory is essential for optimal health?
Right.
You know, that's why I always say if you have ADHD, you're not deficient in Adderall. That's not what you're missing. If you're depressed, you're not deficient in a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, right? You're deficient generally in serotonin. And serotonin's made in the gut through this process called methylation. 90% of the serotonin in our bodies resides in our gut. So if you don't have it here, you can't have it here.
Right.
So depression rarely begins in an outside cluster of symptoms. It usually begins in the gut.
Inward.
So as you move up this cycle, you'll see that MTHFR, which can lead to a myriad of conditions. So you would want to supplement with something called 5-methylfolate or something called folinic acid, which is just the already converted form of this nutrient. So, for example, we talked about patients misdiagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. One of the common things they do with these patients is they put them on something called methotrexate or a corticosteroid. This actually blocks your body from processing folic acid the same way MTHFR does. It actually gives you this gene mutation artificially. And what's the number one complaint of people that go on these corticosteroids? Gut issues. The second complaint is a state of depression, because serotonin that moves the gut also creates elevated emotional states. And so when we supplement with methylfolate, there are clinical studies that show, there's one that was just published on Georgian women that showed a significant link between depressive states and a lack of folinic acid or methylfolate. And so when we supplement with that, we see a lot of these conditions eviscerate.
Wow.
As you move up the chain here, you get into gut motility. So when these genes are affected, it changes the motility of the gut. These people think they have allergies and they can't point to the specific reason why they're getting bloated, or they have gas or bloating or diarrhea or constipation or irritability, and they can't seem to link it to what they just ate, because it's not related to what they're eating. It's related to the pace of the gut, the speed of the gut. And as you move higher, you get into genes that quiet the mind. This one at the top is called COMT. It stands for catechol-O-methyltransferase. Just a fancy way of saying it breaks down catecholamines. And what are catecholamines? Ephedrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, what we commonly call adrenaline, right? So people with these gene breaks, especially these red gene breaks, they are generally night owls. They have very active minds, right? Because remember, human beings, we don't just create thought. We also dismantle thought. It is just as important to be able to degrade thought as it is to create it. The reason for that is if you are creating thought at a faster rate than you're breaking it down, your mind becomes clouded. So these people are night owls because when their environment quiets, their mind wakes up. Right? So most people, if you're listening to this podcast, you'll lay down to go to sleep and you'll be body tired, but you won't fall asleep because your mind will keep you awake.
Right.
You'll be thinking about the most innocuous little thoughts. Right? I mean, did I get everything on my grocery list? Does my belt match my shoes? You know, did I return that email?
Right. So you're looking at mine right now, and I have I can see it. So I have a couple of greens, and so I have 2 greens, 3 yellows, no reds. What I guess what's the average? Like what do you typically see as a ratio?
So what I typically see as a ratio, I mean, I've only seen maybe 5 all green gene tests in the 27,000 that we've done.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad. I mean, you're in really good company. You know, and again, I don't want to say genetic mutations makes people think like, oh, I'm cursed.
No, you just have to know.
Yeah, you want to know what your body has difficulty processing and what it
Yeah.
doesn't, so you can just give it the fuel that it can use.
Right.
And so one of these is the conversion of something called homocysteine into something called methionine. Again, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but homocysteine is one of the most inflammatory compounds in the human body. It's natural at certain levels. It's very inflammatory at high levels. And so what this causes is a very, very active mind. So people with your genetic profile have a tendency to develop something called consummate overachiever profile.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Grant Cardone has it. A lot of patients have it. It's where you are very hard on yourself. You know,
Mhm.
you're kind of your own worst enemy. And the reason for that is you hold yourself to a very high standard.
Mhm.
The more disorganized we are in the mind, the more we crave organization in our outside environment. So usually these people are night owls. They despise clutter. You know, if they're working on a project, the desk they're working on needs to be clean. Usually the room the desk is in needs to be clean. They set a very high standard for themselves. So they will judge the success or the lack thereof of their day based on how many things they get done on an agenda they set for themselves.
Yeah, I can agree with basically all of those things for me, except, so I hate clutter. Obviously, I'm hard on myself. I'm an overachiever. You know, I am super task oriented. I just want to knock out task after task.
Mhm.
The only thing I'm not is a night owl. I'm a much more of a morning person. And like, my mind, I mean, it's always thinking throughout the day, but when it's at night and I lay down, I'm like off.
That's great. I mean, usually with this COMT mutation, especially when this one is red, you have a very hard time quieting the mind. So this is probably also diet related. If you ate a diet very high in folic acid foods, white bread, white flour, white rice, white pasta, high in grains, cereals, you would find that you had difficulty not only with digestion in your gut, but you would find that you had difficulty quieting the mind.
So, Gary, I don't know if you know this. I used to be a pro baseball player. So
No.
I used to do a lot of testing on myself with just diets and workouts and things. And so for me, I've tried every diet and training regimen under the sun. I've tried keto. I've tried, high carb, no carb, whatever you imagine. But one thing I've always done is always high protein. So every day I will eat 180 to 200 grams of protein a day, and I'm 180 pounds. But what I found was every time a trainer would put me on a high carb regimen, the flours, the rice, everything, I would get super like bloated. I would feel like crap, and I just never have liked it. And I always perform better with like little to no carbs.
Right.
And I was just like, and I would have digestive problems, like not to get too in depth, but like it just wouldn't be good.
Right. I mean, I'm not surprised by that at all. In fact, that's what I was saying. You, with that genetic predisposition, it's not actually the carbs so much as it is the folic acid,
The type
right?
of carbs.
Yeah. I mean, because they're coming from white flour, white rice, white bread, white pasta. And we don't call it sprayed with folic acid. We call it fortified or enriched. I mean, think about this, that
So I shouldn't eat anything white is what you're saying.
not unless it's organic, right? Because organic, even some organics still say fortified or enriched. You want to get organic sources that are not fortified or enriched. I hear people say all the time, it's crazy, Gary. I eat a sandwich here and I blow up like a tick, or I have a slice of pizza here and I blow up like a tick. But I went to Italy for 14 days and I ate like a pig. I ate pasta. I ate flour. I ate French baguettes, and I was fine.
Right.
Well, because that bread doesn't have, first of all, seed oils, and it also doesn't have high amounts of folic acid. And if you think 44% of the population has this gene mutation, that means 44% of kids have this gene mutation.
Mhm.
You think about what we feed kids before they go off to school. I mean, a standard American diet. Pop-Tarts, white bagels, cereal.
PB&J.
Yeah, cereal, PBJ. If you pump that much folic acid into a child with that gene mutation, it will be a full contact sport to get them in the car to go to school.
By the way, do you do these tests for kids too?
No question, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I think
My
the
kids
earlier,
are 4 and 2.
yeah, I mean, as soon as they can chew and swallow, then you can, on their own, then you can, you can do this test and you can have an impact on them. It also tells you kind of how to guide their diet.
Right.
And then to your point, I often find myself in this debate when we talk about low carbohydrate diets, but understand that there are essential fatty acids, right? I mean, essential means they're necessary for life.
Right.
There's two of them. If you don't get these 2 fatty acids, you'll die. There are essential amino acids, right? There's 9 of them. If you don't get these 9 essential amino acids, you'll also die. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate.
I've kind of realized this too, and I created something called the Wealthy Way. For anybody who wants it, everything in there is free. It's a course, it's a planner, it's a community, wealthyway.com. And, you know, basically I created this acronym called WEALTH, and it stands for worship, education, affluence, lifestyle, team, and health. And so for me, it was like every entrepreneur needs to be pursuing these things. You need to be working on your faith. You need to be working on your business. You got to be working on, you know, the people around you, your community. You got to be working on your health. You got to be working on, you know, your lifestyle too. You know, what do you enjoy doing? And so the more I just started to like understand that I become more successful, the more well-rounded I am in all these areas. Cause it's like, man, you could be great at 5 out of the 6, but that 6th brings you down.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really important that all those things are energetically connected. And if one is real poor, it's going to pull everything else down too.
Right.
So.
Exactly. It's kind of, I tell this story too to entrepreneurs when they're hiring people. I'm like, look, if you have one bad apple in your company, you need to get rid of them, because one bad apple can bring down 10 good people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, dude, one guy's got bad energy, just always just down and all this crap. He can bring down the rest.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So now all of those make complete sense. You know, like what would you say for these entrepreneurs who are listening now? Like, what are like, they're listening and they're like, man, I get it. That makes sense. Like, what do they do from there? Like, what's the next step?
Yeah, well, I think like you reached out and say, oh, you know what? I want to take a look under the hood. So if you haven't gotten a blood test or gotten a physical, go see somebody, and don't just go to maybe like a regular GP that has 15 minutes to spend with you.
Right.
You want to go to somebody who's more of a lifestyle doc, who's focused on performance and things like that. But, you know, get an assessment there. And again, I'm going to plug my book, because those are the 7 things you really need to know. And if you can't afford to go see a doctor or anything like that, if you focus on those 7 things, audit your life in those areas, and do that first. And then do them, you know, with the doctor to see where all the labs are. And usually when you fix those 7 things, your labs are actually going to normalize. And it's not until we get a little bit older that, you know, some of our hormones start to dip. And so if you're in your 40s and whatnot, and you're starting to notice that your energy's down, your libido's down, your edge, you're starting to lose some of that, then you might want to consider, you know, TRT at that point.
Right. Right. What do you think, like, the lifespan of humans is going to be? I mean, I'm in my 30s. Like, it just seems like our lifespan keeps increasing with all of these new things. Like, it's crazy.
Lifespan, I think, you know, the longest lived human lives, you know, kind of like in their late, you know, 120s, like 126, 129, like a French lady. And I think that's going to be pushed further with all these new technologies. Here's the thing, though, and here's what I want to remind people. We've got the science of longevity, which is all the biohacking devices, stem cells, exosomes, and all this anti-aging medicine that I practice. But if we looked at populations where people live the longest in the world, like Okinawa, like Costa Rica, like Loma Linda, California, like Sardinia and Italy, they didn't have access to any of this stuff.
They're all natural.
Yes. So yes, there's a science of longevity, but there's also the art of living a beautiful life. And living that beautiful life actually also turns on those genes and the biology of longevity. So, I mean, we're fortunate because here in this country, we can combine both, but so many people are forgetting that art of living part. Benjamin Franklin said some people die at 25, they're just not buried until 75. And so with all this technology, if you're just hustling your entire life, work, are you just pushing back the date you are buried if you forget about living that beautiful life? So that's the reminder, is to be conscious and create a beautiful life that you love living every day.
Yeah. No, I love that. I've actually changed my belief on kind of like spending for that very reason. You know, I used to be super frugal, you know, especially in my 20s. I was always like, well, let's save for the future. Let's save for the future. Let's sacrifice now to, you know, do that. And, you know, I would say once I turned 30, I started to enjoy my life a little more. Started eating at nicer restaurants, vacationing more, you know, kind of buying nicer things. And obviously my wealth had grown by then. but I could have totally done a lot of that stuff way sooner, you know? And so I do think that there's this balance of being, you know, financially responsible and like wanting to pursue your career, but also enjoying life in the meantime, not trying to go build up for retirement all the time.
Yeah, certainly. Every moment of every day is meant to be enjoyed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that one. What do you think just about stem cells and everything else? Like, as somebody was telling me, this book Tony Robbins just did. You probably
Life
read
Force.
Life Force, right? And I haven't read it yet because apparently it's like 30 hours to read or something. I'm just like, they're like, read Tony Robbins' Life Force. I looked, I was like, 30 hours? I don't have time to read all this. Like, but they were saying, yeah, there's so many new technologies where it's like Tony was going to have to get surgery and then they just gave him stem cells and he was good.
Yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's a panacea. I think it's worked for some people, and we're studying it more and more. Stem cells, and the stem cells basically secrete these vesicles called exosomes. So that's what those things are. And they're under the umbrella of regenerative medicine. So every time you get injured, stem cells get released, they go to the site of injury, they secrete their stuff, and they cause the body to heal itself. And so we're finding more uses where if there's an injury or if there's any inflammation, stem cells and exosomes can be very, very beneficial. Has it always worked for people? No. It's very, very expensive. And, you know, on occasion, they have some negative side effects as well.
Okay. What do you think's like the most unheard of thing that's happening right now that people just don't even know about yet? I guess in the preservation field, or, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably initially say when I mention like peptides or when I mention exosomes, people are like, oh, those are some fancy words. And this is really under the umbrella of regenerative medicine. Where I think people are just forgetting again, I think, is forgetting that art of living piece.
That's the secret sauce.
That's really the secret sauce. I mean, if you're all just about extending life or performance or whatever it is, and your life is really just consumed about, you know, about maybe, you know, building this, that you forget about the rest of your life. What are you extending your life for?
Yeah.
And there's just so much technology, and now we've got technology to combat other technology. You know, we don't get good light, so we need blue light blocking glasses and things like that. So again, I think just remembering to live a beautiful life and remembering to be conscious as much as you can, to not be in the matrix.
It's funny you said that, because I think that was what I first told you when we first got on the phone. You're like, yeah, you know, so what do you want to do? Like, what are your goals? And tell me about how you feel and your health. And I was like, honestly, I feel great. You know, at the end of the day, I think I take care of myself and I live a pretty good lifestyle. And I don't think I feel like sluggish or anything, like I need a boost or anything like that. And you're like, great. And I was like, you know, but I do see a lot of people I know, they're all like trying to get TRT and all this stuff. And, you know, the more we talked about it, you pretty much said what you said about lifestyle. You're like, you know, as long as your lifestyle's good and you're doing what you're doing, like, you don't need it. And I was like, that's what I've been saying. I've been saying that the reason most people need it, besides age, if they need it earlier in their life, it's because they just didn't live right. Like, that's
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you're out of shape and you don't eat right and you don't sleep. Like, what do you expect?
Exactly it. I mean, again, it's just how we're living, and how we live controls our biology. And I want people to know that, because we've got chronic disease. 1 in 2 Americans have a chronic disease. 1 in 4 Americans have multiple chronic diseases. And all of that stuff could actually shift, because our best medicine is how we live our life.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people talk about that too.
Yeah.
Like, what is a peptide versus like TRT?
Okay, so a peptide is basically a small protein fragment. That's all it is. And proteins is what makes our bodies do what they do. So there's different proteins for different functions in our body, right? So insulin is a peptide. It's a small protein fragment, and its job is when it senses sugar, it'll turn on these channels for the cell so that sugar can enter the cells. That's insulin's job. There's basically proteins that do everything. There's proteins that actually help increase growth hormone production in your body. So now there are these synthetic proteins that are being produced that mimic the peptides that are actually in your body. So you've got peptides that help with increasing growth hormone production. Those are called growth hormone secretagogues. You've got peptides that actually help with erections. Yes, erections, called bremelanotide. It actually works in the central nervous system to help increase erections in men and increase sexual desire in women. You got peptides that help rejuvenate the skin because it helps with collagen production. So you've got peptides for basically multiple different functions in the body. The popular ones are the ones that are anti-inflammatory and are healing, such as BPC 157, but multiple different functions, and all they are just small protein fragments.
And so what do they inject them with, like, how do you take them?
So there are 3 main routes that is being taken. One, intranasally. Some could be taken in a troche form, which is something you just dissolve in your mouth, and others you inject subcutaneously. So you pinch a little belly fat and you inject it that way.
Okay, got it. I was thinking about, as you were mentioning that with inflammation and stuff, I've seen so many of these studies about just like gut and inflammation and like all this stuff. And I have no idea, but it seems like it's becoming this really big thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, people are eating like crap. And the thing is, when your gut's not healthy, you're not going to be healthy, because if a disturbed gut, it's called dysbiosis. Your gut basically is a lining that protects all the shit that you eat, literally. So you've got shit, and then you've got your gut protecting you against that shit going into your body, right? So if you eat things that are unpleasant to your gut and your gut gets inflamed, that barrier is going to start to open up. When that barrier opens up, literally the shit that's in your bowels are going to interact with your immune system that's there.
That's not good.
That's going to basically ramp up inflammation in your body. That's how a lot of autoimmune disorders are caused, and we're thinking that that's also one of the causes of a lot of chronic diseases that we have as well.
So it just seems like there's all these new gut things coming out and probiotics and all that stuff. Like, I've been sitting there looking at it, I'm like, I just don't understand why it's such a big deal, but that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're having any symptoms, sometimes, a lot of functional medicine doctors will start with the gut.
What's your thoughts on basically like COVID and where you think things are going with that? Like, do you think that, I mean, obviously it seems like you don't really hear too much about COVID anymore. It was way bigger, last year.
Yeah.
But do you see that being something that is just your body, once again, a lifestyle thing? You're just going to be more affected than other people? Or do you see it like our bodies are now kind of combating it much better now? Because you don't hear it as much.
Right. Well, a few things. One, I think when COVID first stepped on the scene, we noticed a lot of hospitalizations and death in people who were overweight, who were diabetic, and basically who had chronic disease.
Right.
So if you don't focus your life in those 7 areas, again, I'm gonna beat people to this. Your immune system was also weakened. So it showed people why we were so vulnerable. But the virus has also changed. It's becoming, from that pandemic, more of an endemic. We see a lot of variants now where people happen to get it, and it's not as virulent as the initial wave that we were getting, like Delta and things like that.
Right.
And so what we're starting to see is it's becoming more like the flu, and it's just going to be a part of the population. And most viruses tend to follow this path. Why? Because if you were a virus and you wanted to continue to pass on your DNA, killing off your host is not a good game plan, right? And so it's become less virulent so that it can do that. Yeah, exactly. And that's a good thing, because that means that the hosts aren't being killed off, and it just could be something that becomes very seasonal, like the flu.
So I'm hitting you with every question that I've always wondered about, by the way. So these definitely might seem random, but I've seen these different guys who are like, go the carnivore diet, go the vegan diet. Like, do you see any like merit to doing extreme either way?
It would depend. I would probably say extreme. Generally, I don't like the extremes, because I would probably say the people who are pushing for the extremes tend to be very extreme, and there's a lot of fights going on the airwaves and in social media for people really hitting each other. I would probably say there could be instances where certain diets fit a little bit better for you, depending on your lifestyle, depending on your activity level, and also kind of depending on the disease processes you might have. Like, for example, the carnivore diet. We know that a lot of autoimmune disorders normally happen because your body's reacting. Something's, your gut is reacting to something you're eating. A lot of that tends to be plant proteins. And if you happen to eliminate that stuff, you're eliminating some antigen that's causing that. So some people feel that eating a carnivore diet is good for people with autoimmune disorders.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about these dairy-free and gluten diets?
Yeah, I would probably say that gluten, dairy, soy, corn are typically the main culprits for people that, if you've got gut issues, those tend to be the main culprits. So if you want to start, if you've got symptoms like that, eliminating those from your diet first and seeing if you feel better is a good way to go. And then slowly adding one of them back in and seeing how you react.
That makes sense. Yeah, I remember I was feeling really sluggish back in college. And I'm like, man, why do I not feel so good? And so I got a food allergy test. And they're like, yeah, you came back as being gluten intolerant. And so I stopped eating bread because I was eating a big old Subway sandwich before every game. And I stopped eating it. Now, all of a sudden, I felt instantly better. I was like, holy crap, like I can't believe like how much better I feel. And you would have never told me that eating a Subway sandwich was a bad thing.
Right. So food can be medicine, but it could also be a poison.
Yeah. And, I still eat gluten now because I'm not trying to be peak performance. Like I'm not facing a 95-mile-an-hour pitch. I can function eating bread now, but it's made me really think about it. Like, I guess the next step for me is to get another food test. I haven't had that in like 10 years either.
And what you may notice also is your food allergy test might change depending on what's happening in your life. And once you start to fix certain things, like for example, if I get a food allergy test and you've got like IgG for like a bunch of foods, that's telling me your gut is off and those antigen from the food is just leaking through, which is why you're allergic to so many different things. And you'll find that if you figure out that culprit, heal the gut, the things that you were quote unquote potentially allergic to before, you're not anymore.
Goes back to lifestyle.
Yeah.
Goes back to lifestyle. Somebody told me too. I love like edamame and tofu and anything soy. And they're like, dude, you cannot eat soy. That is like high estrogen, terrible for your testosterone. Is that true?
Yeah, I would. I like soy. The soy, I would probably say more than many other things. It has to be organic. So tempeh is a great soy product, and just make sure that the tofu is organic because if not, then it could be just a disruptor to your hormones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to say too, for everyone listening, right? The reason I'm asking all these questions is because we don't necessarily think about this as entrepreneurs so much. We're like, whatever. I'm still walking and living. It's cool. Like my business is crushing. But I would say if you feel good and you look good and you're just living, by the 7 lifestyle habits that Kian is saying, you're going to crush your competition. And that's what I always say. And I'm not afraid to say, I'm like, look, whenever I come across an entrepreneur who I know is out of shape and they just, aren't doing what I'm doing, because what I'm doing is not easy, takes a lot of discipline.
Yep.
Like, you're just not going to beat me in the long term. Like, you could beat me in the short term, but your body's going to give out. You're not going to win. And that's just the reality, like, as an athlete. And, it's not like I'm really competing so hard with companies or other people, but it's just like, if I know you're not taking care of yourself, I just like internally here in my mind, I know I already got you. You're toast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just know, from looking at certain people, don't look at the numbers so much. It's just also like, are you happier too?
Right.
There's got to be a price that you pay, for being happy. And the happiest person on earth might need very, very little material things to actually keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, how much do you really need at that point, right? Like, why are you continuing, like you said, to push business? Are you just delaying your grave? Like you said.
There you go. Right.
It's crazy. So, for those who, are vibing with what you're saying, I'll put this book up here. So, for those of you looking, Kian wrote a book called Thrive State. It's on Amazon, I assume.
Yep.
So I'm going to read it after talking about this because I want to continue to work on my health. And you're actually a concierge doctor, which is something new that I've learned.
Yeah.
So like you can work with people. Explain like how that works.
Yeah. So again, a lot of my clients, they are men, typically over the age of 40, usually have done very well. Don't have a lot of time to just go through doctors visits and things like that. So I spend a lot of time with my clients. Number one, making sure that we create a new lifestyle for them so they can continue crushing it for years and years and years. You know, I do a lot of the work telemedicine, but you actually have to come visit me either in Arizona, Maryland, or California to establish care.
Mental health is a huge thing, man.
Yeah, mental health is one of those things where, you know, it used to be, hey, if, you know, you were feeling some type of way, you were soft.
Yeah.
And I'm actually guilty of telling everyone they're soft. But that comes from my athlete macho background. But now, like, now you're even seeing it in sports, like, where everyone's talking about mental health and, you know, not being right and, like, seeing therapists and, like, all this stuff. So
you got to talk it out. You got to get a third party in to, you know, just because your viewpoint, because everything in life, man, is perception. And that's the thing. It's you perceive something completely different. Like, I didn't even know what I physically look like, you know, like I know what I think I look like. I don't know, you know, I might look different to you or, you know, the guys out in the, you know, it's one of those things. It's all like a construct of yourself that you make up, you know, and to get another perception can open the door to where you think differently, you know, to, you know, not necessarily like a humble, but it's more of like a, you know, it's gnarly.
Speaking of perception, you know, I love that you said that because like perception is reality. There's like that saying, right?
Yeah.
We actually had Bible study last night and we were talking about this verse that said, you know, love others as you love yourself. Okay. And it was one of those things where it was like, or love your neighbor as you love yourself. And it was one of those things like, yeah, everyone knows you should love your neighbor, you know, that's a given. But like the second half of that is like, as you love yourself. And there's a lot of people who don't love themselves.
It's one of those things that as much love as you can put out, you have to make sure that you put it in first too. You know, you have to make sure that you're on that path where, you know, because you can't really love anybody until you love yourself and you're comfortable with yourself too.
And that's the thing. The Bible says that, like, love your neighbors, you love yourself. You don't love yourself, you're probably going to be pretty worthless loving other people.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, you know, and I'm guilty of being it. You know, I'm really bad at it. I'm a huge critic of myself. I'm like, damn, where'd that hair come from? Why is it growing on my back? What, you know, like,
why is Ann not cutting this?
Yeah. I had a joke about that with the tattoo dude. I was like, I'm going to commission you to shave my arms forever now. And I said, yeah, I usually have Ann that cuts my hair and I walk into the salon, take my shirt off and I'm like, all right, start at the top of the butt, Ann, you know, and work your way up to my head.
But yeah, I just, you know, that is one aspect of mental health first and foremost is like, sometimes people are so concerned about what others think of them. Right.
Absolutely.
And they don't have like this inner confidence or positivity or whatever you want to call it. And so it's like the moment someone says anything bad about them, they're like done.
Because they believe what other people say, you know, and that's a big part of believing in yourself too. It's, you know, yeah. Am I overweight? Yeah. You know, am I working on it? Yeah. You know, it's one of those things that I'm not happy to say I gained 10 pounds since the last time we were on the podcast. That was last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got comfortable eating all kinds of bullshit, you know, so it's...
Dude, you're going to have to get back on the routine, dude.
Yeah, I kicked it back up. I started March 1st, so it's...
Were you just, like, dwelling on all your success? You had the top-rated episode?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm riding this caviar and cracker life now. No, it was more like... I usually take January off from the gym because it's, you know, you get all that New Year's hype. And then, you know, February, I've been busy with the rental property and stuff like that and house and Teresa moving in with me. And, you know, there's been a lot moving where I haven't had an ounce of time for myself because it's, you know, work is 7 to 6 and then, you know, going to the gym in one of those time frames plus packing boxes, moving. And
it's tough, man. It is tough. Speaking of the gym, I have found personally that is one of the things that helps me with my mental health. You know, I talk a lot about routine and, spending time with God and with just being like balanced on all aspects. I want to be balanced physically, spiritually, mentally, financially. Like all of these things play a role in your mental health.
Yeah.
Because if, you're always stressing because you don't have enough money, right? You're going to be mentally like drained.
Well, and you're going to put that up in the forefront too. So you're going to have all this worry and all this, and you're not going to be able to hang on to what's really important, because it's one of those things, money comes and goes. It's, you got to make sure that there's food on the table and, like the house is paid. But in the same respect too, it's like, why do I work so hard?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, it's the keeping up with the Joneses type deal. Like if you,
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, you keep spending more as you make more. It's like you're always in the rat race.
Yeah, you're always in the hole too.
Yep.
It's, don't worry, I'll buy this and we'll see what happens. And, I don't know, it's tough. But, dude, I'm telling you, when I was getting myself mentally re-prepared for, life from my last summer shenanigans, and, dude, I was journaling every day. I was chilling out, and I was meditating, and I was I had all of the full on, essentially me time, really.
Right.
So it was every morning I was in my backyard
Yep.
meditating 6 o'clock in the morning after the gym at 5, and then I was at work by 7. And
Yeah.
it was a good, calm, reflective time where I could build a very sturdy foundation for my day.
Right.
Yeah,
and I think that's why I'm such a big advocate for a morning routine, and I've done plenty of podcast and YouTube videos about morning routines, and I forget what episode number it was. Maybe my crew can tell me. But we'll link to it below, which episode it was. One was about my schedule. But it's just, if you do that in the morning, man, it sets you up for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Because you're like taking the time to analyze you and to like get to know you, versus right when you go out the day, you're bombarded with everybody else affecting you, telling you what's going on, whatever. And like you're letting other people affect you versus you, projecting.
Yeah,
out.
you creating your space and your zone.
Yeah.
It's it's one of those things that was worth so much. We were talking about value in one of the other episodes, and the value behind having a morning routine and getting yourself ready, it's priceless.
Yeah.
It's priceless.
Well, and I'll tell you too, with just building that self-image, it starts with positivity, right? I see so many people that are so negative, and I'm just like, dude, I ain't hanging out with that person. I'll tell you that.
You can't. You're going to carry an umbrella all the time.
Yeah, like, what is that? There's an old saying. It was like the negative people negative people want to hang out with negative people. Like
misery likes company.
Yeah, there it is. So, like, it's so true. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you're miserable too?
Yeah,
like, let's
perfect.
hang out.
Yeah, let's talk about how miserable we are together.
Yeah. It's so
That's
funny,
dope.
dude. So dumb. But it's just that's what happens, right?
Well, people get stuck in the rut because, again, they're not finding the help that they need to be better.
Yeah, so I think one big thing you can do is like you're mentioning now, and I've been saying it before, is like, hey, okay, first off, what can I control like on a daily basis? Okay, let me do my morning routine. Let me get centered. Let me, not worry about all these outside influences. Like it's just my time. And, but the second part of that is, okay, what kind of company do you keep? What kind of things do you surround yourself with? Yeah. If you are around negative people all the time, it doesn't matter how much you try in the morning to like, change your life, they're going to bring you down.
Yeah.
100%. And I would also add, you got to also be intaking positive things and like things that are building you up. And so by intaking, I mean like, what are you consuming? Like what kind of books are you reading? What are you watching on TV? What kind of social media are you watching? Because if you're always watching this stuff that just makes you miserable or makes you feel inadequate or less than because you're like, oh man, well, they're crushing it and like I'm not, and like I suck.
I doing wrong? Yeah, I'm suck. I'm terrible. And
yeah.
What is it? So for every one negative thing that you say, you have to say 100 positive things to make up for the one negative. It's wild.
Dude, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's positivity is key. And then, going to the gym in the morning too.
Yeah.
gets that serotonin rushing. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a little fish in a tank, and I'm like, give me that serotonin. You
Yeah.
know, when they go to feed them, and it's just like I'm swimming up, and give me some of that. You know?
Yeah.
I want to feel good.
No, I'm with you, dude. Actually, while we're on the topic of that, I have one big thing that I really advocate for people to do, but let's hear a quick word from our sponsor before we do it. So the one thing that I really advise people to do is really guard your mind. And so guarding your mind is different for everybody because we all have different temptations. We all have different things that affect us a certain way or trigger us a certain way. And so you just mentioned that, you know, you see one negative comment, it like just drowns out the other 100 positive ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's a big thing I'm doing on social media, right? Like people are commenting and DMing like all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And literally 99% of them are positive.
Yeah.
And there's the 1% that are negative, and you're absolutely right. They bring you down. And so guarding my mind is really just not reading them that much or, you know, not just like feeding into it. Because I used to like respond to the negative comments and try to be not negative back, but like, you know,
Haha.
yeah, like I'll like troll them.
Yeah.
I'll troll them back. Funny, but also like hurtful to them.
Yeah.
You know, and they're already obviously, if they're trolling, they got issues in their life anyway.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me to guard my mind, I kind of just try and ignore, you know, the comments the best I can, you know, focus on the people showing praise and responding. But, you know, if you guys are watching this and you see like I don't respond to a lot of comments, I mean, honestly, it's mainly for my own mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's the truth. It's like I would love to, but it's like those trolls ruin it for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that once the troll gets in just a little bit, that little
Yeah.
pinky toe in the door, they're gonna crack it wide open.
Yeah.
You know, it's wild how somebody can have so much power over somebody else.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, and you know,
playing on insecurities, really.
yeah, and that's something for me guarding my mind. You know, another one would be, as I mentioned, just being around positive people. Don't get around the negative people. And sometimes too, it's not even negative people, but like people who just aren't doing anything. You know what I'm saying?
Stagnant.
Yeah, they're okay with just being wherever they're at, and they have no desire to improve. Like it's like that doesn't align with what I'm trying to do.
Your goals, yeah.
Yeah, like you got to surround yourself with the people who have similar goals and mindsets to you.
Yeah, and you could always level up too. So find people that are positive and that have, you know, huge aspirations to, you know, go hang out with them.
Yeah. And
Maybe an apple will fall from their tree to build you up.
yeah, for sure. And, you know, you might be thinking, well, why would any of them, you know, want to hang out with me or whatever? Like I'm only like, you're already in like the loser mindset.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. You already failed.
Yep. You have to change your mindset right from the beginning of like, I belong.
Mhm.
I'll give you a perfect example. So I actually was in Puerto Rico a few weeks ago, and there was a lot of people like far more successful than me business wise. And I saw the list of people coming and I was like, wow, like I kind of feel like I don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people would be like, how could you feel that way?
Yeah.
Right. It's the same way when they see like athletes or these celebrities making all this money. They're like, why are they unhappy? Like they don't deserve, you don't have a right to be unhappy. You know,
Money buys jet skis. Jet skis make people happy.
just buy another.
Yeah. Just buy another jet ski. It's fine.
Yeah. And no, but I started to feel that way. I was like, man, like I don't really belong in this room. Like maybe I shouldn't go, you know, cause you start like
Good
having,
thing you did go though. Yeah.
I mean, life-changing, dude. Cause, and you know, you got to just really build up your mind to be like, it goes back to that you versus you type deal. Like, hey, how do I perceive myself?
Mm-hmm.
I do belong.
Yeah.
You know, I believe it. I believe I can add value to these other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the very first struggle I had with that was writing my book, you know, because it was back in 2018, very beginning. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, dude, it would be so cool to write a book. I think people would really enjoy it. And I was like, man, but what if no one wants to read it, right? Like that was a fear. What if people say that I'm not like qualified to be writing a book, right? So I hadn't done nearly what I've done to this point.
then who makes the qualifications? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's where it boils down to.
But these were thoughts I was having.
Yeah.
Self-doubts of like, man, should I do this or not? And eventually I got over it, you know. I'm not going to sit here and say like I moped for months or anything. It was like a temporary thing because I'm very quick. Like I will have doubts or whatever, and then I'll be like, no, that's stupid. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
It's go time.
And that's living in the present. That's pulling yourself together and living in the
Yeah.
present.
Like I just have always been that way. Like everyone else, I have self-doubt. I have insecurities. I have these other things, but I'm very quickly able to be like, no, like, why am I even thinking this? This is stupid.
Yeah.
Even if this book changes one person's life,
It's worth it.
it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I went full force, you know, wrote it, and, you know, it's been successful. But, you know, even with launching this podcast, right? Like when you do something new, you have no idea how it's going to turn out.
You never know.
You never know. You don't know how you're going to do, how people are going to, you know, perceive it.
Yeah.
And thankfully it's turned out well, but you don't think I had self-doubt?
Oh yeah,
You know?
It's got well. That's where growth begins, is when you get out of that comfort zone. Because if you become stagnant if you just stay in that comfort zone all the time.
Right.
You know, I mean, look at me. Hey, I'm a chubby guy on a podcast now. You know, like that's one of my big concerns. It's I know I'm funny. I know I'm likable, and maybe, but you know, it's just one of those things where it's like
We got to get you on that the Jonah Hill diet.
didn't he just eat potatoes for a little while?
I don't know. But Jonah Hill, that dude is like the most extreme guy I've ever seen.
Yeah, when it comes to up and down, he just had a thing. It was on TMZ or something. Who knows? I don't know what it was on, but he was like, you know, I'm 37 years old and I'm finally like, I'll take my shirt off at the pool.
Insecure.
There's a huge insecurity about that, and I mean, for me, I'm like, who cares? Grab onto my back hair. You know, I'll swim you through whatever it is.
Right.
But you know,
Well,
I don't know.
and it just goes to the point of like with mental health, everyone, regardless of how successful you think they are, has insecurities and things they're struggling with. I'll tell you, for me, once I decided to take YouTube and social media seriously, I was like, all right, well, obviously I'm on camera all the time. I need to like really upkeep myself.
Yeah.
You know, as far as grooming, as far as, you know, just what I wear, all this stuff, right? And so one of the things I was going through was I was like getting acne for the first time in my life. Super
That's when you
weird.
turn 30. It's puberty too.
Puberty too.
That's puberty too.
Is that a real thing or are you messing with me?
I'm making that up entirely, but I think it's a real thing.
Well, it was real for me.
Yeah.
So I went to the dermatologist and I'm like, man, like the acne is not going away. You know, it was on my back. It was starting to go on my face. And I'm like, dude, at least if I'm getting all this acne, I should have at least been taking steroids or something.
Yeah.
You know, like
make it worthwhile.
Yeah, but no, it's just like out of nowhere. And, you know, I was like, man, I'm super insecure about this. I've never had acne in my life. Back in high school and stuff, I didn't have it really.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going away. I was buying all the stuff. And then I finally went to the dermatologist literally for the first time in my life at 31. I'd never been to the dermatologist in my life. And I'm like, what's wrong with me?
Dude, do you remember Jeff?
Yeah.
This is super side topic. When he had acne in high school and somebody told him to pee on a towel and then wipe it on his face and that'll get rid of the acne.
And he did it.
Then he did it.
I don't remember that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, man.
But so I was at the dermatologist and she's like, yeah, you need to go on Accutane. And I was like, man, like that was like what kids took, but
Yeah.
all right. They're like, you have adult onset acne. It's worse. I was like, really? You can, like, that's a thing? That's what I was asking you, second puberty, if like maybe that was like the slang for
Yeah,
it.
no, it's just.
But it probably is.
Yeah, everybody gets it in different ways because you know.
No, it's worse when you're adult.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I got on Accutane, and this is actually my last month being on it.
Nice.
So it's a 6-month process. It's actually not made me feel, I mean, it's actually made me feel like not very good.
Yeah.
But I have to put up like a strong face and just do it.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's worth it in the long haul. But
it-
anyways,
Shot in the butt or a pill?
it's a pill.
It's a
I
pill.
got to take 2 pills every day.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And long story short, when I first started taking it, my face turned super red. My face like was getting really shiny, and I felt really bad.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was like I'd film these videos because I was still doing YouTubes, And there are people like, man, is he like on Botox? Why is his face so
What?
shiny? Like, what's going on here? I was like, man, like, do I need to get off this stuff? Because like, I could see it. I'm like, my skin is different
Yeah.
because that's the medicine
That's
working.
what it does. Yeah. It's working.
Yeah, and because it's like drying it out. It's like doing this weird thing.
Yeah.
And so I just stayed with it and took it. And, you know, on Accutane, people don't know, but you get super sunburnt. And so, like, literally being in the sun for like 15 minutes burns me.
Oh, wow.
And I went from my whole life being this Filipino who never wore sunscreen.
Yeah.
Filipinos don't wear sunscreen,
Yeah.
you know? You just get tan. So, like, it's been this huge adjustment, but I'm thankful it's over. But the whole long story short of that was, even for a guy like me, who's, you know, perceived a certain way, I was like super insecure about the acne and, you know, having to try and beat it. And then going through the process of like people saying, what's wrong with your, like,
What's wrong with your face?
yeah, dude,
It's like,
you used to have a nice face, man. What happened?
yeah, what happened? Oh, geez. See, and that's wild because it's, you know, you opened up with the insecurity of the face and everything, and that's awesome. And it feels good when you do that. And, you know, that's part of therapy and stuff. It's you get that.
Have you ever been to
release
therapy?
All the time.
I've never been.
It's great.
Like, what do you do?
Well, it's teleconference now because of the Rona.
Is it like the podcast? I just
kinda.
ask you questions.
Yeah, well, we ask each other questions, and you know, like I'll
Okay.
usually lock myself into my spare room, and you know, I'll spend an hour with her, and she's, you know, hey, you got to work on your boundaries, Josh. You're too nice, and
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm too nice because I want, you know, you want people to like you, and
Yeah.
it's just, you know, and. She's like, yeah, but you're too nice. You know, you got to say no.
You know what's funny is like I'm such the opposite.
Mhm.
I'm like, yo, if I got to be a dick to like get this done, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I am not here to like be nice.
Yeah, see, I'm king of the, because, well, again, too, I'm in the service industry too, where it's like, you know, everything is yes. You know, so there's some there that, you know, it's bleeding into my
Right.
the rest of my life because I'm like, I'll handle it. It's fine. I'll figure it out.
I know. I
You
got
know?
to be nicer to my employees because I'll just like open my door and start yelling like, what are we doing? Let's go.
I was kind of laughing about that because I was like, what? Everybody shows up at 10 o'clock?
Oh, I know. I'm like, you guys haven't got a deal today. Like, what are you doing jerking
what are you guys
around?
doing? Yeah, it's 10:30. You guys are taking pictures.
Yeah, taking selfies out there. But I mean, that's what comes with being the boss, right? You got to hold people up because, you know, people naturally, you know, I don't want to say everyone naturally slacks off, but everyone needs to be held accountable in some type of way.
Yeah, there's accountability for every action that you take.
Yeah. But so how often do you go to therapy?
It's every other week. I was going once a week for a while. I just was running out of things to talk about. I'd be sitting there staring at her for an hour, and I'm like,
It's okay.
"Okay, what do we do now? Yeah, yeah. All right, here's my copay. Just hit that card. Yeah, it's fine." You know, but yeah. So I bumped it back to every other week, and I mean, it really you got to find somebody that fits with you too, that clicks,
Right.
because you could have somebody giving you bad advice. You know, like,
You don't want me as a therapist.
yeah, Ryan's gonna be like, go to the gym more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, did you go to the gym?
Yeah.
Is it like the same for everyone? Did you do your morning routine?
Did you do your morning routine? Did you go to the gym?
Did you quit your job yet? Like what?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I mean that's but different aspects of different, you know, realities.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, man. Like that's cool. I've never done it. I've never like felt the need to do it. We've had, so when Mindy, I guess the only time I really did it was when Mindy and I were getting married. We had pre-marriage counseling at the
Yeah.
church. So, you know, we met with the pastor once a week and, you know, made sure we both understood each other's, you know, boundaries, like
Yeah.
you said, and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, one of the reasons I hadn't had to do it is because I'm not afraid to share my feelings
Mhm.
with people.
Yeah.
Even Mindy, even if it's like a tough conversation, I'll be like, let's just like knock this out and get this out of the way versus like deal with bullcrap for the next 2 weeks of like, why are you mad? Oh,
Yeah.
like tipping around the, like, no, like what's the problem here?
Yeah,
Like,
what's
can we-
wrong?
Like,
Yeah.
let's just talk about this right now.
Yeah.
So like one, just not being afraid to have uncomfortable talks
Mm-hmm.
has kind of prevented that. And then I kind of already forgot what the second one was. But
Yeah. Well, when you go into that, it goes back to perception, because you could have a perception and she could have a perception.
Oh, yeah.
And then your expectations of each other
yeah.
are like this. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's tough, especially when you pull somebody else into it. You know,
Yeah. And
expectations are what's going to fail you.
And I mean, we do that for everyone. It's not just, husband and wife, but with my employees, like, dude, if I got a problem with one of them, I'll be like, dude, come take a seat.
Yeah.
Come take a seat.
Come sit in front of me.
I need to get like one of those like big mountain chairs. Like, come take a seat so I can.
Kiss the ring.
No, but we have the conversations and they're tough, but they always lead to the desired outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So
Takes you out of the comfort zone for growth.
dude, I don't even know what the comfort zone is. The moment I start feeling complacent, I'm like, what do I do with my hands?
Mix it up. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know what I'm doing. Why are these not working?
Yeah. What can I touch now?
Yeah.
That's wild. Because it's I've been part of complacency, myself. It's you get comfortable and you think you're going to move up yourself, and
Yeah.
you don't move up on your own without moving.
No. Once again, right? It comes from the very beginning of like your own mindset, how do you perceive yourself, like the things you want to achieve, like this inner drive, So like for me, that inner drive is always on. It's like, freaking, what are we going to conquer next? What are we going to do next? What are we creating? Like people are like, when are you going to retire? Like how much is your financial freedom number? Like how much would you need? I'm like, what do you mean? How much do I like?
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Like
never. I'm going to keep going and growing and building.
I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like typing or texting or by then, like thinking it.
Yeah. Oh, geez. That talk about crazy.
Yeah.
We're just sending mind texts now.
Yeah. I'm going to think my last text to the grave,
That would get so many people in trouble. Hey, eyes up here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But, what would you say as somebody who's gone to therapy, since I don't, I can't speak on it, but like, obviously you endorse it.
Yeah, it's good. It works wonders.
Okay.
It works wonders. It opens up a non-biased avenue so that you can get a full-on perspective of what's going on based from their perception.
Right. And then, do they like teach you anything? Like, do they?
Oh yeah, she sends me like boundaries workshops and
Okay.
stuff like that, and
Get like an action plan.
Yeah. I'll get she'll send me all kinds of stuff like, hey, you got to work on this.
Okay.
And then from our last talk, this is something that you should implement into your life that it will help you.
Okay.
And it's good, and it's little worksheets and stuff like that you could just go through, read them, and it comes in handy because you stop yourself from
Right.
falling into the same trap.
Right. The one thing I actually want to leave the listeners with now they thought about it is, a lot of us want to, find like, I guess, the people that love us, right? Like, man, like as long as people love me and stuff, like I'll feel good about myself, right?
Yeah.
And even a lot of people rely on their spouse to do that. And it's like, no. Like it's going to start with you first.
Yeah.
If you're letting everyone else dictate your mental health and how you feel and everything, like you're done.
Yeah.
Because that's what we call in sports, like just like a fair weather, player. Like, yeah, when things are good, you're good. But when things are bad,
You're bad.
You cannot be consistent. Like you're constantly affected by everyone else. So I think, everyone has tough times in their life, but like the very successful people who are, already mentally strong, they're the ones who push through it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And because it really all depends on, it's what you want and what you have, and not necessarily what have, but it's your ambition.
Yeah.
And you have to keep going with that because, if you don't have that drive and ambition, you're not going to go.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'll tell you, that's one of the biggest things I look for when hiring, my employees and people I want on my team, because, man, it sucks to say this because, we're talking about mental health and how important it is, but I can kind of sniff right from talking to people whether like they're mentally strong or not, and it's like at the end of the day, like I do not want like soft people working for me. Like
Yeah.
just if you're mentally weak and it's like every little thing that goes bad affects you, man,
Their
not gonna cut it,
productivity
dude.
isn't going to make
Yeah.
it. Yeah, because they're just going to start feeling bad about what it is. And, there's some people that are cut out for it and there's some people that aren't. And it's just, you got to find your niche.
Yep. And it's like the mentally strong people that I have are like the people who have been with me forever. They're the best workers. And like the mentally soft ones, like they either don't make it or they're just not that productive, or, it's tough.
Yeah, they're lining up taking selfies in the morning.
There's like 8 people I'm looking at right now that we're going to have a talk after this.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like when I go to work, I'm like, I get in trouble when I'm not there early.
Bro, you're not here mandatory early, dude.
Yeah, you're not here mandatory early. I know you start at 8, but
6. We need you here at 6.
Yeah, we need you here at 6.
Dude, that's great.
Right. You could get by just
So
eating
if
meat.
you just marinate on that, we realize that there isn't such thing as an essential carbohydrate, meaning they're not essential for life. So I'm not telling everybody they need to be on a keto diet or they
it's
need to
funny
stop eating
because-
carbs, but
Well, so I just interviewed Liver King a couple of weeks ago.
okay.
And obviously Liver King's got his whole controversy with steroids and stuff.
Right.
And we could talk even, I'm curious about your thoughts on TRT and things like that too.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
But basically what he was telling me was like, I honestly don't eat that many carbs. Like I eat mainly just nose to tail meat.
Yeah.
And he's like, I eat a ton of fat and a ton of protein. And he's like, that's just the ancestral lifestyle. It's the way our ancestors ate and everything. What do you, that sounds like what you're vibing with.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. It's that the source should be clean meats. Like in Miami, I actually joined up on Amish farm.
Okay.
I became a member of an Amish farm because they deliver grass-fed, grass-finished beef, free-range, pasture-raised chickens. They eat worms and grass and bugs. They deliver eggs. They deliver non-homogenized, non-pasteurized dairy. So I get all of our creams, dairies, yogurts, and actually milk from there. That's non-pasteurized, non-homogenized, doesn't have carrageenan, doesn't have all of these this nonsense added to it like sugars.
By the way, before you keep going, like why I hear this all the time that, the big food companies are destroying food and that's what's jacking us up.
Most of it's actually not food. Yeah.
Like, is it just purely for profits? Like, why are they doing that?
It's for mass production. I mean, if you understood how seed oils, for example, were processed, right? They don't actually start out that bad. But take canola oil, for example.
I've heard it's terrible.
It's terrible. I mean, they realized that when they sprayed these crops with glyphosate, which is a pesticide, when they sprayed them with glyphosate, it would actually kill the seed. So what they did was they genetically modified the seed of canola so that it could withstand glyphosates. And now once they harvest it and they actually press it in an attempt to make an oil, it actually comes out very gummy. So they actually have to degum it with something called hexane, which is not only a known neurotoxin, it's a highly carcinogenic. So first it's degummed and then they heat it above 450 degrees Fahrenheit, which completely denatures the oil and turns it rancid. It's absolutely the most disgusting rancid smell you've ever smelled in your life. If you've ever been to a canola factory, it's hard to even get near the building. And so now that it's rancid, they have to deodorize it. And they use sodium hydroxide, which is another known neurotoxin and highly carcinogenic. They will also use bleaches to bleach the oil to turn it clear again because it's cloudy. So it has to be degummed. It has to be bleached.
They're just trying to make it look good.
Yeah,
like, that's all it is.
And then they bottle it and put it in on the shelf. I mean, it doesn't resemble anything like it did when it left nature.
Right.
I mean, at first it starts being genetically modified, and then it ends being completely an industrial seed oil. In fact, canola oil was originally used as a machine lubricant.
Yeah. When they tell me about all these things with like the Beyond Meats and like they're like,
too terrible.
I know. I'm like,
it
looking,
just
I'm like,
kills
how
me.
can you tell me this is better for you? Like, this is the biggest scam
It is
on the earth.
biggest. It is just the biggest scam on earth. I mean, there's a war on protein right now that I don't understand because muscle is our metabolic currency, right? It's an organ.
Right.
It's like our skin is an organ, but our muscle is an organ too. And there's something called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wasting. And sarcopenia is directly tied to all-cause mortality because the weaker our musculature and the greater the fat to muscle ratio, the higher the incidence of all-cause mortality, the less mobile we are, the more prone we are to joint injury and whatnot. If you look at the NFL season after they came back from COVID, you had the highest number of non-contact injuries in the history of the league.
Right.
Now, why is that? Because we took a huge break from conditioning.
People weren't moving.
Yeah, people weren't moving. And then all of a sudden they moved a lot. And we had, I mean, all of a sudden you heard of people growing PCLs, posterior cruciate ligaments, which you don't ever hear about in sports, or very, very rarely. So ACLs, MCLs, lateral collaterals, you had all kinds of hip and rotary injuries in the ankles and the knees, because the musculature had been compromised from taking time off. And it's very important to have lean muscle mass, especially as we age. It determines our metabolic rate. It determines how many, our caloric intake, all kinds of things. But going back to your gene chart here, you'll find that when you have this consummate overachiever profile, you'll find that it's very easy for you to get disappointed in other people because you'll feel like they just can't do the basics.
Yeah.
So
I'm like, just do it. I don't understand why you can't do it.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't. People with that genetic profile don't understand it because it's so inherent to them.
Yeah.
That they believe it comes easy for other people.
Okay, I have a question about this though. So I've always said this to like the night owls and like the people who have, from your definition, the red in that one gene.
CompT.
Yep. I'm like, you just need to be more disciplined and like learn to shut your brain off. Like, how much of it is mental discipline versus genetic? Like, there's got to be a balance, right?
Yeah, but it's one thing to say shut your brain off. It's another person to be that. It's another thing to be the person with the active mind.
Right.
It's like I always say, you can't reason somebody out of depression. You can't reason somebody out of anxiety. It's very hard to reason somebody into shutting their mind off. And by that I mean, first of all, we have to understand that the brain, as sophisticated as we like to think it is, it does not know the difference between perception and reality. Truly doesn't. So if we understand that we can elicit the same response in the mind without the presence of a stimulus, what I mean is, let's say you drove home tonight, you got out of your car, somebody was standing in front of you with a knife. Very real threat, right? Your pupils would dilate, blood would, your heart rate would increase, extremities would flood with blood. You're having a fight or flight response.
Right.
But you could be laying on the 40th floor of a condo and start thinking about getting eaten by a shark and have the exact same reaction.
Mm-hmm.
The chances of a shark making its way out of the ocean and up 50, flights of steps or taking the elevator up are zero. And me trying to reason you out of that fear because there's no chance the shark's going to come attack you will not change that situation.
Right.
So now that we understand that the brain can actually solicit the same type of response, whether there's the presence of a fear or a stimulus or not, then we start to understand that it's coming from our physiology. So the reason why people can't quiet the mind is because they are not degrading thought at the rate that they're creating it. If you ask them what they're thinking about, I promise you, they are thinking about the most innocuous little thoughts. Nothing that couldn't wait till the next day. Nothing that has to be thought about at that moment. And certainly not anything that is life-changing, right? Or loss of a loved one, something that should keep you up at night. So once we understand that, then we say, well, how do we quiet the mind? We put the right amino acid balance, SAMe in people that are deficient, L-methionine in people that are deficient, B complexes, specific B vitamins, so that the brain has the resources to degrade catecholamines. See, people that have that gene mutation will also say things like, I work really well under pressure. And the reason why they say that is because really what they're saying physiologically is, I lack the ability to set priorities internally. So I use external pressure to set my priorities. And so what happens is they end up going from 9-alarm fire to 9-alarm fire to 9-alarm fire to 9-alarm fire. And they get things done, right? They never miss a deadline, but if it's due September 29th at 9 a.m., they finish it September 29th at 8:59, right?
Yeah.
And so they get used to working under pressure because pressure drives their priority because their mind is so active, they even have a hard time setting priorities. Whereas if you supplemented for that deficiency, cleaned up the diet so that you had the right raw materials, then you would find that priority setting becomes much easier. The active mind begins to quiet, that you actually can lay down at night to go to bed and your mind won't wake up.
Mm, that makes sense. So it starts inwardly, getting the right supplements to offset this. And that in turn should help you become, just in my words, stronger mentally. Like,
Yes.
to be able to do these things.
No question.
Okay. So like even with what you're seeing on my gene chart, it will always be that way no matter what, right? And so it's just making sure I get the proper things for my
if you're
body.
going to supplement for deficiency. Right?
So
And
what would I
said,
be taking based on what you see?
So you'd be taking 5-methylfolate, a B complex, which is just pyridoxine, riboflavin, thiamine, niacin, pantothenic acid. And it usually comes in a single capsule. And L-methionine.
And I just take that every day the rest of my life.
You would take that combination of things every day for the rest of your life, be a game changer for you.
Mm.
Just putting those raw materials into your body would be a game changer for you.
And what about diet?
So a diet low in folic acid, which you sort of discovered on your own.
Right.
So the high carbohydrate diet also was high in folic acid. And so when you talked about the bloating and the gas and all the other complications that you had when you were trying these high carbohydrate diets, what you were feeling were the consequences of changing the motility of your gut. You see, people that have that gene mutation should really try to avoid folic acid. It's astounding what happens to children when you strip folic acid out of their diet. It's astounding what happens to human beings that have that gene mutation when you just pull folic acid out of their diet.
So folic acid, to be clear, is anything basically white carb, like a white carb is basically it.
Almost all white carbs, white flour, white rice, white bread, white pasta, all grains that are fortified or enriched. Right, we decided not to call it,
but to make it simple, right?
Yeah.
Because most thing, if
anything
I go to the
fortified or
restaurant,
enriched.
yeah, they're gonna, it's gonna have a white carb, or it's probably gonna be fortified.
Yep.
Okay, that makes it simple for me. Now I noticed with 10X Health, you guys also have these like machines and things too, right? So it's like, all right, that's step 2, get supplements.
Right.
Are the machines step 3? Like,
and
what's that?
then step 3, because we want to take you as far as you want to go towards being a superhuman.
Yeah.
And we call it the superhuman protocol. But essentially all it's doing, this superhuman protocol, is taking everything that's good about Mother Nature from outside and bringing it in. Right. We get 3 main things from Mother Nature. We get magnetism, we get oxygen, and we get light. Magnetism from the earth. Earthing and grounding is a very real thing. I mean, if you think about the last time that you had bare feet touching bare soil, dirt, grass, sand, it's probably been a long time. For most of us, it is. And we're certainly not doing it on a daily basis. Human beings build up a charge. We actually discharge into the earth, believe it or not. So to mimic this magnetic field, we use a PEMF mat, pulse electromagnetic field. There are hordes of published clinical studies. I have tons of them on my Instagram. I have tons of them on our website at 10xhealthtest.com. I'm a huge believer in data, but if you look at what happens to the human body when you expose it to low Gauss current, magnetic current that's similar to the surface of the earth, you'll find that you can repolarize. You can actually, the surface, you can change the charge on the surface of the cell. So what happens is that causes your cells, especially your red blood cells, to separate and become free floating. One of the things that happens when we become slightly acidic is our cells start to clump together and stick together.
Okay.
When we become more alkaline, then cells start to separate. And remember, alkalinity is a charge. pH stands for potential hydrogen. So if you want to change the charge in the body, you run low Gauss current through the body, not drink alkaline water.
So with all of those things,
the PMF, sorry, then the second one is the oxygen.
Yep.
It's called Hypermax. And so we take ambient oxygen, we run it through an oxygen concentrator, we fill up a bag full of about 900 liters of 95% O2. You put a mask on and you cycle for 10 minutes in the morning.
right?
So you put this mask on, you breathe 95% oxygen. It raises what's called the partial pressure. It floods the blood with oxygen. And once the blood is flooded with oxygen, then we lay you in a red light therapy bed and we drive that oxygen right into the mitochondria. It is phenomenal because—
And that's daily?
3 days a week.
Oh, 3 days a week.
3 days a week. I mean, because the modalities are so expensive, we're going to put them, we're going to put this superhuman protocol inside every wellness center that we have across the country, and eventually having 20 in every state, because we want the masses to have access to it.
Right.
So they can just get a membership, come in and use it as often as they want. 2-3
you're going to
days
have like a
week.
gym membership.
Yeah, like a gym membership. And you just come in and you use superhuman 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, it'll wipe out jet lag. It'll improve cognitive function. It'll deepen your delta wave of sleep. It'll restore your waking energy. It'll upstage your mitochondria. It'll actually flood the mitochondria with oxygen.
Right.
These are all things you can measure, by the way.
Right.
The effect of it is measurable.
Wow. So what did you see going on with like guys like Grant and Dana White when they came on as clients?
So Grant's main issue was joint pain, brain fog, lack of energy, really, really, really poor sleep, very sore and achy in the mornings when he woke up, like he had a night workout the night before when he hadn't. Soles of his feet were sore and achy when he got out of bed.
So, but before, like, I mean, Grant's in his 60s now. And Grant, I mean, he
64.
looks great. Yeah, I mean, he looks amazing. But like, I mean, he's 64. Like, shouldn't that stuff happen?
Some of it happens, but look at him now. Go back on his Instagram 4 years ago when we started working with him and look how he looked then. He looked 15 years older than he does now. It's been 4 years since I started working with him, and he looks 15 years younger. And so we went into the blood work. I pulled 64 biomarkers in his blood, and the clinical team looked at those biomarkers and said, okay, he's deficient in he's got a hormone deficiency. He's got these nutrient deficiencies. He's got this issue with controlling blood sugar. We worked on blood sugar, hormone deficiency, nutrient deficiencies, not super rocket science, no big secrets. And then we supplemented him for his genetic breaks. We supplemented him for the genetic deficiencies in his body so that, in effect, those genes didn't have as big of an impact. And
the same thing we're talking about with me.
Same thing we're talking about with you. And so what happened to Grant? Sleep immediately deepened. Waking energy went through the roof. His youthful exuberance returned. He started to take on a more youthful appearance. We also use peptides, which are amino acids that we use to influence different functions in the body. Balanced the hormones, got his blood sugar under control, and then he started using superhuman. Started using magnetism on a PMF mat, oxygen in a bag, and light from this red light bed.
And it's just
and same thing we did with Dana.
Yeah.
And Dana and I just did a podcast where we actually took his before and after blood work and we put it up on Instagram because a lot of people said, oh, it was just the keto diet that made all those changes. And that's patently false. So, you don't get on the keto diet and get off all your blood pressure medication and thyroid medication and diuretics and all of those things that Dana was on. And right now he's actually not on any prescriptions any longer. I think he was on 7 when we started.
That's crazy.
And 2 of them were for blood pressure.
So you mentioned deep sleep, and I've talked about this before. I've had other doctors on the show, and they basically were like, yeah, deep sleep is super important. If you're not getting that, that's like your regenerative sleep and everything else. And I got one of those Aura rings to test it, and I found out that my deep sleep was like insane. I sleep about, I sleep on average about 6 hours a night, and my deep sleep is always over 2 hours.
That's excellent.
Yeah, and because I've always wondered, I'm like, why I can sleep very short periods of time and feel great.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I sleep very short periods of time. I think we went to bed last night at 11:30 and I got up at 5 this morning. So 5.5 hours. And I feel amazing.
Yeah.
But I also go straight off a cliff. I get a lot of delta sleep and I come straight out. So, sleep is an issue that gets overcomplicated in my opinion, very often. And there's really 2 types of broad reasons why people are not sleeping. One is, and I ask a lot of physicians this, why is it that people that are the most exhausted sleep the worst? Because you'd think that people that are tired all the time would sleep the best.
Right.
But the truth is the reason why they're tired in most cases is because their blood is low on oxygen.
This is my wife's problem.
Yes. So you show me somebody on their blood test that has low red blood cell count, low hemoglobin. Red blood cell is kind of like a tennis ball, and hemoglobin's like the fluid in that tennis ball. It's inside that fluid that oxygen is bound. Right. So if I start pulling those tennis balls out of the bloodstream and I take the few that are left and I drain half the fluid out of them, there's not much place to carry oxygen. So people that have low red blood cells, low hemoglobin, mainly because they're low on hormones, have low oxygen transport to begin with, right? So they're tired all the time because everything that you perceive about energy is nothing more than oxygen in your blood. If you told me, Gary, I had a lot of energy today, physiologically what you're saying is I had a lot of oxygen in my blood today. So if oxygen equals energy, which it does, then if we want to raise your waking energy, we need to raise the amount of oxygen your blood transports. And so now take somebody who's borderline anemic or just low on red blood cells, low on hemoglobin, not transporting oxygen well. Now they go to sleep. Right. So they lay down. What's the first thing that happens? Their respiratory rate starts to fall. So now as their respiratory rate falls, they're bringing in less oxygen to a bloodstream that's already poor at transporting it.
So it just keeps
so
going
now they
over
kind of begin to
itself.
mildly suffocate. And what does the brain do when it notices your blood oxygen get low? It pulses cortisol to wake you up. So these people look like a bouncing rubber ball going down a hallway. They can sleep 11 hours and not wake rested.
That's my wife. She
Right?
sleeps a lot and she has issues with fatigue and
so here's what when I talk about the biometric chain in the human body, when you take a condition somebody has like I'm low on energy and you convert that to physiology, what it really means is I'm low on oxygen. So now when you say, okay, we're low on oxygen, let's trace that back into the root. All right. How could I raise blood oxygen? Well, I look at the red blood cell and hemoglobin. If I see that that's low, I say, well, where are red blood cells and hemoglobin made? They're made in the bone marrow. So now you go to the bone marrow and you say, well, why are you not producing enough red blood cell and hemoglobin? Well, we have to go to the boss of the bone marrow, which is the hormone testosterone. In men and women, one of the primary roles of testosterone is not male characteristics. It's not aggression, facial hair, deep voice, muscles. The primary role of testosterone is to put pressure on the bone marrow to create new red blood cells. It's called erythropoiesis. So if you show me somebody who is deficient in the hormone testosterone, I will show you somebody who's very likely deficient in red blood cell and hemoglobin and is also tired. So then if I go, well, what's testosterone made out of? Well, among other things, it's made out of DHEA. So are they deficient in DHEA? And then if I go below that and say, well, what is DHEA made from? Vitamin D3. So if I want to restore this biometric chain, I go vitamin D3, raise that to the optimal range, DHEA, raise that to the optimal range, and then see if that moves the hormones. Because if it does, it's going to fix the rest of the chain. If not, then you go to the hormone and you correct the hormone level. And there's a bunch of ways that you do that. You can supplement, you can use TRT, you can actually use boosters to boost testicular production of testosterone. And once you put that hormone back into the optimal range, you'll see that the bone marrow begins to spit out new red blood cells, raises the number in the bloodstream, transports more oxygen, they have more energy.
So speaking of TRT and just, I guess there's very difference between TRT and steroids and all these other things.
Huge. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that because you're just seeing everybody want to get on it.
Right.
Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, so my thoughts are, if you look at the American Journal of Urology, which is widely, especially for men, is considered the Bible for male endocrine therapy. In 2018, they published their new testosterone guidelines. If you actually Google American Journal of Urology space testosterone, and then when you pull that article up, you look down at start at question 13, you'll see something called practitioner guidelines and counseling of a testosterone deficient patient. And basically what this is advice to physicians on what they should say to patients that are deficient in testosterone. And it blows through all of the old myths that testosterone is linked to prostate cancer, that it increases cardiovascular disease, that it has an increased rate of thrombolytic events, stroke, heart attack risk. And it actually updated those to say that the testosterone deficiency is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. There's of all of the organs in the human body, the heart has the highest number of receptors for testosterone, 10,000 roughly. So when we are deficient in testosterone, we're deficient in mood, we're deficient generally in red blood cell hemoglobin levels. Our heart is deficient in testosterone. So I'm a big fan of hormone therapy that puts hormones back into the optimal range.
Okay.
And you see, the challenge with hormone therapy is it's not so much about the levels as it is about the ratios. Like if you look at women, for example, their level of estrogen is not as important as their ratio of estrogen to other hormones.
Okay.
Perfectly normal in a female menstrual cycle to have estrogen in the 400s. It's perfectly normal for their estrogen to be in the teens. So if the range is 400 to 19, how do you know that 121 or 160 or 220 is high or low? Well, you don't. You have to look at where they are in the cycle and compare that to other hormones. As long as they stay in the right ratio, they're fine. You take a man that has estrogen in the high 40s, but his testosterone is 900, there's not an issue. Take the same man with estrogen in the 40s and his testosterone is 190.
Yeah.
Massive issues: weight gain, mood, brain fog, lethargy, water retention.
Right.
So ratios in human beings are very, very important. So I'm a huge fan of hormone replacement therapy when it's needed. I'm a big fan of peptides. There are all kinds of peptides right now, peptides for anti-aging, peptides for skin, for hair. There are peptides to restore youthful levels of growth hormone in the body. They generally don't carry a lot of the side effects that other exogenous things do, taking them from outside the body and putting them in. They're amino acids for the most part. They're amino acid sequences. So the body recognizes these, actually metabolizes them. So there's things we can do to rewind our pituitary to a more youthful level of growth hormone secretion. There are things we can do to restore healthy gut function and seal the gut. There are healing peptides like BBC157. There are even some peptides that are targeting increasing telomeres, one of the hallmarks of aging. There are telomerase peptides. One's called epitalon. There are peptides targeting anxiety, anti-anxiolytics like Selenk. So a lot of these peptides, and they have well-researched human clinical trials, some of them not done in the US, but still human trials. And so our clinical team believes that they pose significantly less risk than a lot of chemical-laden alternatives.
So do you have any opinion on, I mean, I know ratios are important for anything, but especially when it comes to testosterone. Do you have any issues with age or specific times to wait?
Well, you know, when you pull blood work, generally it's age dependent, right? So there are ranges for a postmenopausal female and a premenopausal female. There are ranges for young men and older men.
Right.
So some when you look at blood work, for example, ranges are adjusted for age. IGF-1, it's on like growth factor is different in a 20-year-old than it is in a 50 or 60-year-old.
Right.
So it's the optimal ranges that are important. You know, what is the optimal range for sugars? Where the optimal range for testosterone? Was the optimal range for IGF-1? Some of these other markers that get suppressed as we age. I mean, we know now that if we keep levels in the optimal range, then we restore optimal function.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it's not, and you know, I guess basically the problem becomes when people are in range, but they just want to be way above range.
Right. Supraphysiologic levels are where all the problems come from. Right. Meaning levels that are multiples of the optimal ranges. You know, people that take high doses of growth hormone from outside the body and put it in run the risk of shutting off their pituitary secretion of growth hormone.
Right.
See, there's a hierarchy in the body, and there's a command system. There's a captain, there's a first mate, there's a second mate. And whenever we go into the human body and we replace function, we want to obey this command hierarchy, right? So growth hormone, for example, which is a big one in the news lately because of the Liver King issue. You know, the brain gives commands to something called the hypothalamus, which gives a command to the pituitary, which then secretes growth hormone. So the brain's the captain, the hypothalamus is the first mate, the pituitary is the second mate. If you take high doses of growth hormone from outside the body and put it in, then basically the second mate is telling the first mate what to do, and the first mate's telling the captain what to do. So you never want to reverse what we call upstream regulate. You want to try to obey the hierarchy in the body, the natural physiology in the body.
Right.
And that's why we went from, you know, early TRT was people were doing a single shot a month. And then it went to 2 shots a month. And then it went to once a week. Now most people do blended testosterones twice a week to try to keep their levels looking like rolling hills rather than looking like heart monitors, right? Because when we dose in a non-physiologic way to replace a physiologic deficiency, then we create a whole set of other problems.
Right.
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 So, I hope I answered that question. I feel like I just ate your face and
No,
went down a rabbit hole.
No, it makes a lot of
go
sense.
On tangents, man. I apologize.
No, because I
get excited about this stuff.
So many people ask me about this stuff, and like, look, I got a lot of entrepreneur friends who have not taken care of their body, right? And they most certainly, they're not workout fanatics. They weren't pro athletes. Like I'm very much an experimenter with my body. And, even when I was playing sports, I watched guys take steroids and other things. And I never did it because I was just like, yeah, I mean, morally, I didn't want to do it. And as I get older now, I'm 33. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not competing in sports or anything, so I could do whatever I want with my body at this point.
Right.
Like, what's the optimal thing to do? And so from what I've been told by many people, it's like, hey, don't get into any of that stuff as long as humanly possible.
I agree. I mean, there's no reason to replace healthy function that doesn't need to be replaced. I would say that 70% of the hormone therapy patients that are 10X patients are, our doctors don't put them on hormone therapy. They restore optimal levels of hormones with, in most cases, without taking it exogenously. As soon as you begin to take hormones, other things from outside the body and put it in, you naturally start to slow down or even shut off your own production. At 33 years old, the last thing you'd want to do is be dependent on hormones for the rest of your life. But if, as you progress in age, if you develop true testicular hypofunction where you're not producing adequate levels of hormones, then replacing is not only the right thing to do, it's very healthy for you.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at one of the best places to go to see the consolidated research is that 2018 Journal of American Urology publication on testosterone guidelines, because the links next to the claim will actually show you the clinical studies that support those claims.
Yeah.
And now we understand that we can restore youthful levels of function by restoring youthful levels of hormone balances and ratios in the body.
Right.
And that's what happened to Grant Cardone. That's what happened to Dana White.
So do you believe that humans are going to live a lot longer with just all these things?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, there's people walking alive today that are going to live to 140 plus.
Really?
No question.
That's crazy.
No question. I mean, with what we know about intermittent fasting and cellular autophagy and senescent cells, and
you think 60 is like the new 40?
60 is easily the new 40. I mean, look at Grant Cardone. He's 64 years old. He doesn't look, act, or perform like a 64-year-old man. I spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah.
He is one of the most acutely sharp human beings.
Yeah, his mind
ever.
is still functioning very,
like a 30-year-old.
Right.
And he has the energy of 10 men. And he's clear. He's cognizant. Short-term recall is on point. He doesn't, nothing about him resembles a 64-year-old man. And if you look at him biologically, he's much younger, right? So now we're
How
starting
do you
to
do
measure
those biological tests to see like how old you are?
So biological age and chronological age are they're judged on a whole myriad of factors. One of the big hallmarks is telomeres. And if you haven't heard of a telomere, you can look down at your shoelace and see that little plastic tip that's on your shoelace. This is kind of like the tip of a chromosome. As that plastic tip gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, eventually it's gone, that shoelace will fray.
Right.
Right. So this is the same thing that happens to a chromosome. So the length of a telomere is correlated to your biological age. So you can't do anything about chronological age, right? That's how many years you've been on this earth. But your biological age is how youthful your biome is. And with the advent of peptides, things like intermittent fasting, which helps your body clean up senescent cells that are no longer doing a good job in your body.
Are you a fan of intermittent fasting daily?
I'm a fan of intermittent fasting for people with poor blood sugar regulation.
Okay.
Right. I don't think intermittent fasting is good for everybody, just like I don't think keto is good for everybody.
Okay.
And just like I don't think vegan diets are good for everybody. But
we know Beyond Meats is not good for anyone.
Beyond Meats is not good for anybody.
Okay.
I mean, I'd actually rather eat the plastic carton that comes in than eat the Beyond Meat, because I just crap that out.
Exactly.
And this is true with a lot of inorganic, vegan sources. We could go down that whole rabbit hole later, but because I actually get 75% of my caloric intake from fat, and I
Really?
have the same blood fat as a vegan. The last time I pulled my triglyceride, it's about 60 days ago, they were 45.
So you're
Um,
saying 70% of your diet is fat?
75% of my diet is 70 to 75% of my diet. Caloric intake is from fat.
And then you're saying what? The other 25% is protein?
20% protein and probably 5% carb.
It's so funny. The more I talk to you, the more I realize you have very similar things to what Liver King was saying. Because I asked him the same thing. I said, tell me about like the ratios. What do you think your macros are? He's like, probably like 70% fat. He's like, I don't really eat carbs. And then he was saying the same thing. He's like, you got to go grounding. You've got to get the sun. You've got to do all these things.
Yeah.
And he's like,
the truth is most of us are not getting enough sun. It's not that we're getting too much. We're not getting enough sun.
yeah,
And we have no idea how responsive the human body is to light.
right.
We are light beings. Photobiomodulation is the rage in sports recovery, anti-aging,
I love light.
longevity. I
Yeah.
do too.
I remember when I was playing ball, I used to love day games. I'm like, dude, I just feel good.
Yeah.
It's just great
Well,
being
in
out here.
population mortality, and I used to be in the mortality space. If you look at life expectancies, the longest life expectancies on Earth are centered right around the equator. And for every, I think it's 20 degrees latitude that you move away from the equator, there's a precipitous drop in life expectancy until you get to the poles, where you have the shortest life expectancy on Earth. When I was born, a true Eskimo had a 56-year life expectancy. Right? They got very, very little sun.
Right.
Brittle bone disease, horrible immune systems, atherosclerosis, arterial sclerosis, osteopenia, osteoporosis, all of these conditions that come from actually lacking light.
With eating so much fat, how much protein are you getting or like a day? Like how many grams?
So
do you think?
20% of my, I get close to, and again, the grams of protein don't equate to the total caloric intake. So when I say 75%, I mean 75% of the volume I eat is not fat. 75% of my caloric intake is fat. So I still get a high amount of protein. I'll eat grass-fed fatty ribeyes. I'll eat wild-caught salmon. I eat a lot of coconut oil, olive oil, nuts, avocados. So a lot of fatty sources, whole eggs. I also believe that we really only need about 4 or 5 oils in our diet. You can use coconut oil, ghee butters, tallow, or grass-fed butter for cooking.
You don't like olive oil?
I like olive oil and avocado oils at room temperatures.
Okay.
Right? They'll denature at high temperatures, so they'll turn rancid. Whereas coconut oil, butter, ghee oil, tallow are great sources of fat that you can use to cook with, and they taste amazing, and they give you high, calories. I post my blood work, by the way, to Instagram every time I do it, every few months.
Yeah.
Because I get a lot of flack from the bro science community saying, well, if you eat that much fat, you're going to get hypertriglyceridemia. Your cholesterol is going to go through the roof. I have mildly elevated LDL cholesterol, and I have floored out triglycerides.
So
How
how much, I guess, do you know your macros? Like how many grams of protein?
I don't measure the macros, but I weigh 205 pounds, so I probably get about 190 to 210 grams of protein in it.
Okay. So you're doing what I do.
Yeah.
I just eat more carbs right now. But I'm like, dude, they say I'm not going to have energy if I don't have any carbs. And I'm like, I don't know that it's true.
Dude, I get the energy sucked out of me when I eat carbs.
Yeah.
So if you look at, again, what does energy mean? Everything you perceive about energy is nothing more than oxygen in your blood. So if I was to actually put different meals into this 30-foot tube that we call the intestinal tract, right? And remember, your intestinal tract's 30 feet long. It's enveloped with blood vessels, right? And the amount of blood in your system is fixed. The amount of oxygen in your system is fixed. So if it's here, it can't be here. So if it's in your gut, it can't be in your brain. Why do we get sleepy after meals, especially after high carbohydrate meals? I mean, try eating a basket of bread and a bowl of pasta,
Yeah.
and then tell me how you feel in 25 minutes. Why is that? Because pasta and breads are high glycemic, high carbohydrate, spike your sugar and insulin, but they also cause all of that blood to flood to the digestive tract to digest it. It takes significantly more blood and significantly more oxygen to digest carbohydrate than it does fats and proteins. So what happens is you eat a high glycemic meal, and then all that wonderful blood and oxygen from your brain floods to your gut, and now you're exhausted and you're foggy and you're tired.
What do you think? So I've heard a lot. I've talked to multiple people who are like carnivore diet type
Mhm.
people, and basically they all think vegetables are poison.
A lot of vegetables are poison. I mean, they have lectins. They have all kinds of mechanisms in them to protect themselves from predators, just like
Yeah.
we do. And a lot of these are gut destroying. Peanuts, for example, which aren't really nuts, they're seeds, they're legumes, are full of mycotoxins and lectins. A lot of vegetables have high amounts of lectins, which are like.
So do
almost
you
like
eat
spike-
vegetables?
I eat very little vegetable.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I eat.
Are there any
asparagus.
that's like good?
I eat asparagus, Brussels sprouts. I'll eat heads of broccoli, and I eat arugula.
Okay.
Those are my go-to.
But other than that,
And
you're
lots
like,
of avocado, but
I don't
it's
want any.
technically a fruit.
Yeah. But fruit's fine.
Fruits are fine. I prefer fruits that end in berry. Blackberry, raspberry, blueberry,
Yeah.
strawberry. They're lowest on the glycemic index. But remember, fruits, especially if you're going to spend money anywhere on organic nutrients, you want to spend money on organic fruits.
Okay.
Because fruits absorb nutrients through their skin. There was actually a recent publication that I read about inorganic strawberries, where they actually took inorganic strawberries right out of the supermarket. They pressed them and pulled the juice out of them. There was enough pesticide left over in the juice that they actually pressed out of the strawberry, inorganic strawberry, to respray the crop with
Shut
pesticide.
up.
Send me a text. I'll send you the article. And I believe that because you spray a pesticide on the skin of a fruit or an herbicide or insecticide, and it's going to draw that into the fruit, right?
So my main thing for 2023 is I definitely want to take my health way more seriously, because I've just been a young dude, just like, yeah, I look good, I'm freaking feel good, like whatever. And I know that I can't do that forever. And
Right.
I have to be very intentional. And so I'm trying to get answers and research and talk to lots of different opinions. But it's funny because the more people I talk to, the more share what you're telling me. And
I mean, a lot of us have
and
reached the same conclusion. We
yeah,
we
and
come through different
I
doors, but-
naturally kind of fell into that conclusion too over years of trying things. So it sounds like to me, I need to, number one, focus on, you know what? People tell me vegetables and carbs are good. It's not necessarily true. I need to just
It's patently false, actually.
okay, it's 100% false. So I need to just continue to eat my freaking red meats, my fish, and I mean, it kind
Red
of
meat
gets boring
source
just
is
eating
important,
meat.
though.
Like what else do I eat with a meal? Like I don't want to just eat
I
meat.
mean, meat, fish, chicken, eggs.
I know, but like there's no sides at that point. It's just purely meat is like my meals.
No, you can still have vegetables. It's not your primary source of intake, and choose organic vegetables, right? A lot of the issues that happen from our diet are less about what we're eating than what our food eats. So non-grass-fed meats have significantly more of an impact on atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis than grass-fed meats, because this omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid ratio. Vegetables that, inorganic vegetables that are full of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, preservatives are, when you're putting those kind of chemical-laden things into the body, that's where the perversion in function comes from.
Okay. So I'm gonna clean up my diet with that.
Mhm.
I'm gonna supplement what 10X Health prescribes me.
Mhm.
I'm gonna look into getting on the superhuman.
Yep. Magnetism, oxygen, and light. That's a game changer.
And sounds like that's really all I need to do. Is there anything?
That's it. And then to develop a consistent morning routine.
I've been doing that for years.
Okay. So great. I mean, most entrepreneurs have some kind of morning routine. And I don't say that one is an absolute better than the other. If you wake up and you journal and in gratitude and, you do a little breath work and then some light cardio, but a consistent morning routine, I don't know anything from a physiologic standpoint that will have a greater impact on your longevity.
Yeah. That's
our bodies crave routine. Our circadian rhythm is highly dependent on routine. I mean, mine is very simple. I wake up in the morning. I get a cup of black coffee. I go right out onto my porch at first light. I never miss first light unless I'm traveling. I do 8 minutes of breath work. I get done with the breath work. I have a huge glass of hydrogen water, and then I go in and do superhuman and hit the gym every day.
Yeah. No, we have, so that's what the Wealthy Way is all about. Just helping entrepreneurs live truly like fulfilled lifestyles. And I created a planner that people can get for free to help keep them on their routines. And
That's
stuff.
awesome.
So anybody can get that at wealthyway.com.
The thing that this gene test will do, because I feel like we spend a lot of our lives trying to manage time.
Yeah.
And it's virtually impossible to manage time. But you can manage focus.
Right.
And, the more highly focused you are, the more time you get back. And so by helping your mind prioritize and focus and become less foggy and increasing your waking energy, which is why I'm such a huge fan of gene testing and supplementing for deficiency, you get a lot of focus back in your life, and therefore you get a lot of time back in your life.
No, 1,000%. So my last question, my wife, so she has low thyroid. What would you consider with that? Oh, and by the way, let me preface this. So we found out she had low thyroid from a doctor I had on the show. She took a blood test or whatever we took. And then, it got flagged. And so she went to I don't even know what you'd call it, a holistic doctor, right?
Naturopath or
Yep.
holistic,
And, he basically put her on gluten-free and some other supplements. I don't know which one's which, but she's like, I've never felt better going gluten-free, like doing this.
Yeah. I'll tell you why. Because interestingly, and again, I'm not a physician, so I can't give medical advice, and this is not meant to be medical advice. But if we look at how the thyroid functions, right? The thyroid secretes two hormones, T4 and T3, right? And that's what it does. Only the little known fact about the thyroid is that it only produces 20% of the T3 in your blood. 20% of the T3 hormone is produced by the thyroid, which means when it's low, hypothyroid, there's an 80% chance it's not the thyroid. And yet in 100% of the cases, we medicate the thyroid. We hold the thyroid responsible for a crime it's not committing. And we do this constantly. We do this with a lot of organs, and we punish them for crimes they're not committing. So the question is, if it produces T4 and it only produces 20% of the T3 in our blood, where does the other 80% of the T3 come from? It is methylated from T4. It is converted T4 into T3, which happens outside the thyroid in the gut. So by changing her diet, one of the reasons why she feels better and has likely seen changes in her thyroid is because there never was anything wrong with her thyroid.
Right.
People tell me all the time, like, oh my God, Gary, I started taking those supplements and it fixed my thyroid. And I remind them, it didn't fix your thyroid. There was nothing wrong with your thyroid, right? To begin with, it fixed your methylation. When you give the body the raw material it needs to make these conversions, T4 into T3, magically T3 rises and you no longer have hypothyroid in some cases because there never was a condition wrong with the thyroid. So I hate those terms, hypothyroid. We should say hypo T3.
Right.
Where does T3 come from? Oh, 80% comes from the gut. We should be looking at the gut first and say, let's fix methylation by diet, getting folic acid out of their diet if they have the MTHFR gene mutation, supplementing with the right raw materials so they can convert thyroid hormone T4 into T3, and then see what happens.
Right.
And then just get out of the body's way instead of hammering a perfectly healthy organ for something it wasn't committing.
Right.
This happens with a lot of hypertensive patients too, people that have high blood pressure. The most common form of hypertension is called idiopathic hypertension of an unknown origin.
Got it.
And you look at these people, normal heart sounds, normal lung sounds, normal EKG, normal EEG, normal dye contrast study, normal cardiac cath. They can't find anything wrong with the heart. But the pressure's still high. But when you look at their methylation, you find they can't bring homocysteine down. And when they can't bring that inflammatory compound down, it narrows the arteries. It irritates the arteries. And if I make the arteries smaller, pressure goes up. So as soon as you bring that homocysteine down, in many cases, the arteries relax, pressure returns to normal because nothing was wrong with the heart.
Well, dude, the way that you can explain everything is unlike anything I've ever heard with how the body is
Awesome.
working.
Thank you.
And I'm super excited to get on this regimen. I'm excited
I'm fired
to
up for you too, man.
like get more feedback that, okay, Liver King, whatever you think about him, you think of him, but then to hear it from you two and like to have experienced, I'm like, all right, I'm going to really go for this. And so I'm excited. I'm actually going to get my family to do the test too, so we can make sure we understand their
Best gift you can give
situations too.
Yep.
And that is a good gift. That's a
it's
Christmas
great. It's a
gift
gift
right
to
there.
help.
If somebody does want to get somebody a late Christmas gift by the time this airs, where can they find this?
They can go to my Instagram, just at Gary Brecka. And on the Instagram, on my link tree, you can order the test, or you can go to 10x, the number 10, the letter X, healthtest.com.
10xhealthtest.com. We'll link to that down
10xhealthtest.com.
below, and we'll link to Gary's Instagram. Gary, I appreciate you coming out, man. Means a
Appreciate
lot.
being here, man.
Yeah, guys, make sure you follow Gary, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Peace. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that podcast. Thanks for making it to the end. The good news is I've got another one that I know you're going to like, and all you got to do is click it right here. Linking it right here. All you got to do is just click it, and you're going to see this new episode that you're going to love. Thanks for making it to the end. The good news is I've got another one that I know you're going to like, and all you got to do is click it right here. Linking it right here. All you got to do is just click it, and you're going to see this new episode that you're going to love.
If the government wants to give Fortune 1000 CEOs and founders and all those guys $500 billion or $200 billion, don't give it to them directly. Give it to low and middle income families. They'll spend it. They'll spend it, and the money's going to flow to all those Fortune 1000 companies. Now all of a sudden you're sitting there saying, these CEOs' net worth increased by $500 billion. I wonder why. You gave the money to people that don't know how to handle money, and the money rolls to the people at the top.